Welcome to the Heavy Spoilers Show. I'm your host Paul. In this video we're breaking down Aliens vs Predator. The two movies saw a battle of the ages that had long been teased to fans of the franchise. Ever since that xenomorph head in Predator 2, people have been desperate to see the pair fighting off against each other. That finally came in the form of these two movies, but did they live up to expectations? And what else did we learn about the creatures? Well, throughout this video we're going to be breaking down the films and also going over how they were made. With that out of the way, thank you for clicking this. Now let's get into Alien vs Predator. Hall & Oates, Ben and Jerry's, Batman and Robin, Beavis and Butthead, Nancy Reagan and the MGM backlot. These are things that belong together. Every kid in the 90s wondered who would win in a fight, the terrifying perfect organism that's the xenomorph or the greatest predator alive, the Predator. 2004's Alien vs Predator finally gave us the chance to see the ultimate fight on the big screen. Though we'd had a comic series with a pair facing off against each other, multiple games, and lots of arguments in the playground, this fight had never made it past those stages. Alien vs Predator though, that changed everything for the better. Growing up, I remember back then there was lots of crossovers in the works and little teasers made fans like me extremely excited. Batman name-dropped Superman and Freddy and Jason faced off in 2003. But nothing had really come from the xenomorph skull spotted at the end of Predator 2. With Ripley far in the future and the Predator not seen since 1990, it didn't feel like we'd be getting them anytime soon. However, when this was announced, fans like me went absolutely crazy! In the end though, the film wasn't that good and the real fight was between the movie and the critics who panned it. Oof, but at least they got legendary Paul Anderson to direct. Wait, hold on. Oh, they got Paul W.L.S. Anderson. Fuck's sake! Yep, fresh off 2002's Resident Evil, Anderson was given the rights to the characters, blending things from the comics, ancient aliens, and packing more slow-mo than a Zack Snyder movie. It's certainly far from being a fan favourite. As a kid, I was expecting the likes of James Cameron's Aliens mixed with John McTiernan's Survival in the Jungle, and I think expectations were incredibly high. Because of that, the movie was never going to live up to it, but since then, I have softened on the film. There's a lot to like in it, and it advances the Predator lore on screen in a really cool way. Packing what's still one of my favourite flashback scenes in the entire franchise, we discover how the two species are intertwined. And all in all, I think it works well with the lore. Throughout this video, we'll be going through the movie scene by scene, and also talking about the making of and how this came to be. If you enjoy it, please hit the thumbs up, and make sure you subscribe for videos like this every week. Without the way though, thank you for clicking this longest intro ever. Now let's get into Alien vs Predator. Now when it comes to casting, I think Sanaa Lathan does a fantastic job playing Lex. You may recognise her from Blade, and there she portrayed Vanessa Brooks. When it came to making the movie though, she wasn't initially the frontrunner and they were going with Queen Latifah, which would have been interesting, especially around the 2000s. However, she ended up having scheduling issues, and this came in the form of classics like Taxi and Beauty Shop. So you can completely understand. Literal Scream Queen Neve Campbell also turned down the movie, which I think would have been a wild thing to have in the film. Which was another go-to for a young boy like myself who also enjoyed seeing certain things on screen smashing together. In the end though, I'm pretty happy with the main character that we got on screen. Terrible joke. Now as mentioned earlier, the idea of this crossover originally began with Dark Horse in DC. Executives at the former were initially going to try and make the movie happen until Chris Warner stepped in. He proposed that they use the in-house properties to make things a lot easier. Having bought the rights to both Alien and Predator, the company published the first AVP story in 1989. That was Dark Horse Presents issues 34 to 36, which saw a similarish story to this movie. There an alien queen was kept in chains to lay eggs, which were shipped off to be eventually hunted down by young Yucha. Bless you. We saw them then sent to a prehistoric planet where they'd become blooded into the Predator's way of life. There's a few Easter eggs that point towards that legendary story as well, which we will point out during the scene-by-scene breakdown. Now this also inspired the jaw-dropping moment in Predator 2 where we saw a xenomorph skull on the Lost Tribes trophy wall. That's also something that's given a reference to in Predator Badlands with an Independence alien skull. Funnily enough, Roland Emmerich was also offered the director's chair for this film, and that was because, Independence Day came out and was absolutely massive. That was like the alien blockbuster of the 90s, but unfortunately he ended up declining. After the Dark Horse Presents did well though, they then established a full event in 1990's Alien vs Predator comic. There we saw the Oucher send eggs to the planet Arishu. One problem though, mate, a colony already exists there, which was called Prosperity Wells. That nicely tied in with Weyland-Yutani and was kind of like Hadley's Hope in Aliens. Much like the movie, the humans were who we basically saw the perspective of, and we watch as them had to fight both the xenomorphs and Yocha. It's a fantastic read, and it sees Machiko Noguchi teaming up with a predator named Deshande. She eventually endured the ordeal, whereas in the end, the predator ended up dying. However, he'd give her the mark of the blooded, much like how we see Scar do this to Lex at the end of the movie. Later, she'd then be recruited by the Predator Top Knot. However, it wasn't all sunshine and rainbows, and she got mocked by the clan and also the runt of the litter. Even though she cut off an alien queen's finger, it didn't impress them. It don't impress me much, they said. All of this got too much, and she left the clan after hearing they were hunting humans. She then went on to help the colonial marines take out the predators, and eventually went back to civilian life. Working like an office job where she gets home after a long day, puts her feet up and watches mediocre YouTube channels. If that all sounds familiar, then it should because it's your life. But beyond that, Lex actually takes a lot of inspiration from Machiko. She was also at some point planned to interact with Ripley, as the original outline was to set the movie in the same time period as Alien. They scrapped that in the end though, set things in the present day, and since then, it's completely fucked the timeline up. That said though, she's very, very Ripley-like. Overall though, I feel like the Alien and Predator, they definitely carved the way when it came to crossovers in comics. Tarzan vs Predator, Predator vs Judge Dredd, Archie vs Predator, even that, and Batman and Superman vs Predator, and even Batman and Superman vs Alien and Predator. Yeah, they were crossing over everywhere. I'm sure though, if you're a 90s kid, then you definitely remember this cover, and I remember seeing that on shelves and just buying it because of that. Now, most of the stories involving the pair culminate with the humans teaming up with the Predator. Obviously, you can't really talk to a xenomorph because like 100% of the time, they're gonna kill you. So these alliances between the pair, they're always formed in the stories, and that's pretty much the staple of every single telling, and this film as well. Now, from this point, a spec script was written based off the previous comics. This was by Peter Briggs, who also wrote Hellboy. Ironically, we almost got Guillermo del Toro take the role as the director, but in the end, he opted out to make Hellboy. However, that script was shelved due to the upcoming Alien Resurrection. In the end though, not everything was lost. The script was then taken and adapted and used for the AVP arcade game. We were truly blessed. That's where I first got my head around this universe, and for Christmas, I begged my mummy to buy me the PC adaptation. I died within 3 minutes because I was like 6 years old and I just couldn't handle the keyboard. I didn't know what QWERTY was. But happy memories. Now, both James Cameron and Ridley Scott were asked to direct the crossover. Neither were interested though. Cameron even rightly predicted it would devalue both franchises. He compared it to Frankenstein meets the Wolfman and said they're milking the thing dry. I feel like the creative team probably found that comment funny as they play the movie on the TV in the satellite station. Maybe that's me reading into it, but either way, that was the first big crossover film, and it inspired things like King Kong vs Godzilla. Sigourney Weaver also said it sounded like a stupid idea when asked about it, and yeah, the people we know for the franchise were very openly against it. However, we're not really here to see them, and it's the titular characters that are what's going to sell the tickets. So the studio pushed on. Another comic-accurate script was then rejected as the producers hoped to set the movie on Earth. It was then that the pitch by Paul W.S. Anderson was accepted. That blended the idea of Machiko's story and an Earth setting, making it the best of both worlds. He utilised a drawing of the Uchiha looking over the pyramids, and in the end, this is what won the executives over. And who can blame them? To me though, they really should have done a sort of apocalypto here and had this take place in the past. I love those period settings in the Predator franchise, and I think that would have worked really well. Either way though, the story was heavily influenced by author Erich von Däniken, specifically his 1968 book Chariot of the Gods. It put forward the idea that ancient civilizations received their technology from aliens. This formed the basis of the futures present on Earth, and we discovered they built 3 major civilizations' pyramids. And may also have been why some of those civilizations just disappeared. Anderson was also inspired by the H.P. Lovecraft story At the Mountains of Madness, which is inspiration for a lot of exploratory horrors. Is that a genre? It is now. That featured a scientific expedition to secret ruins that led to previously undiscovered things about humanity. Things like The Thing, Edge of Noah, and so on, they were all inspired by that story. He was then given the job, and it took only 2.5 months to film. They then added an extra 4 months for post-production, and all in all, very quick turnaround. It was also shot on the cheap as he utilised locations in Prague, which allowed the costs to be lower. However, it did mean they needed to use about 20 tons of fake snow. Anderson was a huge Alien fan though, since sneaking in the first movie in the 70s, right up to the comics. Arrest that man! Funnily enough, it's also the second Ridley Scott universe that he's technically worked on, with Soldier taking place inside the Blade Runner timeline. Alien is also connected to that as well, as we saw Dallas's files say he worked for the Tyrell Corporation. Event Horizon and Soldier showed that he had the chops for sci-fi, and I remember being quite excited due to loving the former. Looking at the Rotten Tomatoes score for those movies at the time though, I'm like, what the hell are you? Did we watch the same movie? You are wrong! I even quite liked his Resident Evil movie, and even though it got terrible reviews, you know, as a fan of that franchise, I thought it adapted it well. And hey, say what you want, at least he got to marry Mila Jovovich out of it. I will happily take a Resident Evil rights to do that. I think where people had an issue with this film though is mainly down to the director's style. In Resident Evil he took what was a slow, atmospheric, ambling horror and basically turned it into a nu metal music video. He also pretty much did the same thing here. I think when you go back to the Alien franchise, like a lot of them, they're pretty much just art films in disguise. While that's not the case with Aliens, I think the first and third, you know, you can definitely argue that point. That original Predator as well, that's about stalking and paranoia, all of which are gone here. I think the time of the movie's release also made it so the film had to be presented a certain way. It's abundant with slow-mo. The Matrix was of course massive at the time though, and that pretty much set the mold for an action movie. Now, there's actually 2 versions of this film in the wild, and the first is the theatrical, and the other's the Extreme Edition, which is available on physical media. This was actually a UK exclusive upon release, and I remember thinking, the UK's gangsters. Put away that soft shit, mate, get out the hard stuff. We will be going through the Extreme Edition though and pointing out all the differences between that and the theatrical cut. So if you haven't seen it, don't worry. Beyond that, I want to talk about all the callbacks and references, and from this point in the video, we'll be breaking down the film, so let's get into it.
7 days ago, one of my satellites over Antarctica hunting for mineral deposits discovered a sudden heat bloom beneath the Earth.
Now, we start in Antarctica in 1904 at the Razorback whaling station. This is our first change, as it wasn't part of the theatrical edition. We're going extreme from the off. We know where this is though, as there's a huge sign written in English, despite this being a remote Norwegian station. This is clearly a direct nod to At the Mountains of Madness though, which took place in a polar expedition around the turn of the century. This then clearly inspired Who Goes There, which is what The Thing was adapted from. That revealed that a Norwegian base had discovered the creature, which is something that also happens here. Now, this whole set was made on a studio backlot despite them wanting to film it in Prague. The novel actually goes into a bit more detail on the location, and we discover the workers found a Predator drop pod ship frozen in the ice. That then led to the Yocha awakening and killing each and every one of them. Carl was then left alive at the end, which is where we pick up in the movie. In a bit of a goof, when Whaler Carl is running around, we can see his top 2 buttons are undone. However, when he's trapped, they're buttoned up.
Boy, I really hope somebody got fired for that blunder.
Which, terrible. Now, you think it's game over when the triple laser sights hit, but then we get a jump scare when a xenomorph leaps forward. You might notice that the xenomorph's invisible to the heat detection, and the Predator has to change modes to see it. So it kinda hints towards the xenomorphs themselves and how they're cold-blooded creatures. From here we then jump to the title, but they do something really nice with it. The Alien vs Predator initially comes in with the Ouija language before changing to the green text from Mother. Great way to marry up the two franchises, and they pull this over to the opening of Alien Earth. We then cut to a satellite. However, in another cool bit of set design, this first appears like the Alien Queen. It's only once we pan around that we see the truth and get the reveal of the Weyland logo. Now, according to the novel, the company was supposedly worth $375 billion. They were also on track to build a base on the moon, by 2020 no less. Rest in peace, Charles Weyland, you would have loved SpaceX. This was obviously pre-merger as well, and it was only in the wake of Weyland's death that Yutani managed to buy it. The date is then shown as October 3rd.
It's October 3rd.
In what's a clear nod to HAL from 2001, we can see it's detected a heat bloom over the Antarctic. Now, this might have been inspired by the real-life failure incident. A US satellite picked up what appeared to be a nuclear flash on Prince Edward Islands. We've never had it confirmed exactly what it was, but researchers believe that Israel carried out an atomic test there. That's all a conspiracy though, and as we later learn in the movie, the bloom was simply the pyramid's power system powering up. It's long been theorized that there's ancient structures below the ice, and some even think Atlantis moved there. Even on Twitter now, before making this video, I was getting recommended like videos of Antarctica, and yeah, people are fascinated with the continent. We then cut to Silverleaf, Nebraska, where Weyland's got an array of satellite dishes. But there's an interesting goof here. In the book, this station was located in New Mexico. The pizza boxes also hint at this, as they're from Daily Pie Cafe. It's actually a real-life restaurant in New Mexico, so something must have changed during the pre-production phase. The dude taking the pizzas was also cut from the theatrical release, but there's a very cool Easter egg. As this is pre-Weyland Yutani, Weyland has his own slogan, "Building a Better Future." If this rings a bell, then it's because in Aliens, the Weyland Yutani slogan was "Building Better Worlds." Here, we're not capable of space travel though, but it wouldn't be too long until they managed to do it. Now, the guy eating the pizzas are Alec Gillis and Tom Woodruff, who are the co-founders of ADI. They were the studio that split it off from Stan Winston and later worked on a lot of these films. That included Predators and The Predator. However, another design house, Edge FX, they made a pitch to work on the movie. They even had a slight redesign of the Predators, which I think actually looked pretty cool. As the heat signature is detected, we can also see a drinking bird at the right. This is a callback to the original Alien, and it later got referenced in Alien Romulus. I've always found the woman who comes over very interesting though, and this was mainly due to her looking very annoyed that something was actually happening at her job. You'd think it's gonna lead to something, but nope, she never appears again. The reason I focused on her though was because I recognized her from somewhere, and then I realized she was the medic in Resident Evil. Beyond that though, she was also Mark's school crush in Peep Show. So lots of trivia there. Now the satellites also picked up Morse code as well as a scan of the temple. The code itself actually translates to "whoever wins, we lose," which was a tagline for the movie. Now this is some massive foreshadowing for the future, as we all lost when AVP Requiem released. Before we get to that though, we cut to Lex as she's climbing the Lola Icefall. In real life, yeah, we did our research, and this is actually more of a mountain pass than something to climb like this. I always remember this being in the trailer at the cinema though, and back then, you know, when you went to the theatre, you didn't have it revealed what the trailer was straight away. Nowadays, you know, you most likely watch trailers on social media or YouTube, and before clicking it, you're probably going to see the title. Back then though, there was a real air of mystique, and I remember like even the Batman Begins trailer, you know, you didn't know it was Batman until right at the end. I remember seeing this for the first time as well and not really knowing what was going on. Then you got the reveal that it was Alien vs Predator, and yeah, my jaw was on the floor. What this scene does perfectly is that it introduces Lex as a badass and that she's perfect in this kind of expedition. We see her quickly recruited by Maxwell Stafford, and here he's played by Colin Salmon. I was a massive fan of him at the time because of the Bond films, and he also worked with Anderson in Resident Evil. Meeting her at the top of the peak, he offers her a job as we then fly to another location. That is Teotihuacan in Mexico. Here we join Sebastian and Thomas on an unsuccessful dig. It's outside a pyramid, which foreshadows where the pair will go later in the movie. Spend millions on this dig, lots of time and effort put into it, but in the end, all they find is a Pepsi bottle lid. Now, you might remember back in the 90s that Pepsi had been a major sponsor in these kind of films. Terminator 2 had the drinks brand absolutely everywhere, and even Alien 3 got its own commercial. everyone knows the way to defeat aliens with a can of Pepsi. Anyway, back to the movie. This scene's cut down massively for the theatrical release, with it being far longer in the Extreme edition. This was mainly due to pacing issues, which led to a jump scare in the underground also being cut.
According to you, the Teotihuacans' final gift to their dying king was a Pepsi.
Now, they then kicked off the dig. Now, in the end, this scene reminds me heavily of Jurassic Park. Both movies have a pair out on a dig, only for a rich benefactor to offer to take them out to an island in exchange for funding. It's also wildly similar to Prometheus. There we saw a pair discover a star map and Peter Whalen paid for their expedition. We even have the company founder discussing the expedition with the crew in a big hangar, which is very in line with that. In fact, both movies have multiple civilizations who are far apart, yet all share similar paintings or tech. Ridley Scott, you absolute hack! The recruitment drives the success though, as they all fly to the Ross Ice Shelf. Here we get a magazine with none other than Charles Bishop Whalen on the cover. Emphasis on the Bishop there. Here he's played by Alien alumni Lance Henriksen, who I'm sure you of course recognise from those earlier Alien movies. The role was written specifically with this actor in mind, and the director desperately hoped he'd accept the part. Bishop first appeared in Aliens, where he subverted fans' expectations by being an android with a heart of gold. Cameron would then later reuse his turn in Terminator, where Arnie portrayed a good guy robot in the sequel.
I prefer the term artificial person myself.
Yeah, alright you clanker, you fucking clanker, piss off! In Alien 3, he also portrayed a damaged Bishop, and Bishop's creator, Michael Bishop. There we learned Michael worked for Hyperdyne and made the Bishop synthetics in his image. Now, this is a bit of a mess when it comes to timelines and lore, mainly because Mr. Whalen appeared in Prometheus as the head of Whalen Corp. Both were precursors to Weyland-Yutani, with Yutani being referenced at the end of AVP Requiem. Don't worry, I will be subjecting myself to that abomination, as long as you promise to hit the thumbs up. Beyond that though, we were originally going to see Mr. Yutani appear in this movie. Gary Busey was approached to play him despite being in Predator 2, and also not Asian. The producers actually approached Arnie and said, "Will you do it?" And he said, "Yes, I'll be back, eh?" However, that was only on the proviso that he lost the election to be California's governor. So yeah, the Terminator became the Governator, and we lost out on another, yes, another opportunity for Dutch to return. It seems like he'll be back in the sequel of Killer of Killers. Milk that joke, but it seems like he's going to be back in the sequel for Killer of Killers. But yeah, I've been burned by the promise of an Arnie return so many times, so yeah, we'll see. Either way, the magazine talks nanotech, medicinal acoustics, and the technology of early civilizations, which is something we of course explore in the film. He's called the pioneer of modern robotics, which is a reference to the future Bishop in Aliens. We then see Dr. Graham Miller taking selfies for his kids. Played by Ewan Bremner, you may recognise him as Spud from Trainspotting. He also was in Wonder Woman as well, and Miller mentions his kids Jacob and Scotty. This might be a reach, but it could be a reference to Captain Scott, who was a legendary Antarctic explorer. The Jacob Islands also exist in Antarctica, and with this being set there, you know, maybe he's named his kids after them. Either way, we learn that exploring this frozen wasteland's in her blood, as her dad trained most of the pilots, and she's a very experienced guide. They then approach the Piper Maru, which is an ice-breaking ship. This is named after the X-Files episode, which also featured a ship named Piper Maru. The episode was named after Gillian Anderson's daughter, and Maru's Japanese for ship. Lance Henriksen also appeared in the show, and then got his own spin-off with Millennium. So lots of connections there, and it's a similar name to the Shinyo Maru mentioned in the 1995 book Aliens Colonial Marines Technical Manual. Cutting to the briefing, again, it's very, very Prometheus. Like at points I was like, did Ridley Scott actually steal from this? Here we hear the archaeology duo have the plan to take the money and dip, but of course their curiosity's gonna get the better of them later. Both this and Miller being told to get off the snowplow were also cut from the theatrical release. And yet, they don't really add much. Did make me chuckle though, as Miller's chastised by Mark Verheiden.
"Get off, we've been wearing your ass for a hat."
Tommy Flanagan, who's playing him, he's actually Scottish, just like Ewan Bremner, but he's playing an American here. The mercenary's name is also a reference to Mark Verheiden, who worked on many of the Aliens and Predator comics. Most notably, that landmark Predator concrete jungle. Poor old Spud then gets called Beaker like the Muppets. From here, we're then given a presentation by Whalen. I did wonder if the trench coat that he has on was what he wore in Alien 3. I don't know if that's intentional or not, but yeah, it carries across nicely from it. In the end though, what he's here to explain is that they found a secret pyramid. Its designs a merge of all the three Great Pyramids, including the ones from the Aztecs to the Cambodians and Egyptians. There are even hints there that these civilizations may have been wiped out by either the Yautja or Xenomorphs, and later on we see how they leave nothing to chance. Cut from the movie was also a little line explaining how Sebastian was ostracized from the scientific community. This was due to his out there theories on how the pyramids came to be. Presumably, this is why he was hired by Weyland though. As we learn, time is of the essence, and other companies will be trying to get there and investigate it. I like to imagine Ms. Yutani is watching over the area too, and they've done something similar with Alien Earth. Now, the drill team's led by Rustin Quinn, who's played by Carsten Norgård. I was watching him and thinking, hey, I recognise that guy. If he looks familiar to you, then you might recognise him from the recent seasons of Cobra Kai. As Lex says, she wants to go home, and we then get a really cool Easter egg. While looking over the files, we see Weyland putting a pen between his fingers. This is obviously a nod to Bishop playing the knife game in Aliens. You may notice in that clip that he's also doing it to Hicks, who's played by Bill Paxton. These two are actually the only actors to have characters that were killed by a Xenomorph, Predator, and also a Terminator. Truly an esteemed category to be killed off by the triquetra of sci-fi villains. Well done. Now, whereas a Bond villain would kill her for wanting to leave, they're actually pretty nice about it. They even tell her when her flight's coming. They've got her like a first-class flight. Her replacements are being scouted as they speak, and we hear they're called Gerald Murdoch. This might be a reference to Andrew Murdoch, who's an art director on the movie, albeit with a different spelling. Interestingly, on Weyland's laptop, you can also see a news article that says Carl J. Woods dies at 52, hinting that he's been looking up Lex's father after she tried to quit. Later on, she explains how he died, and this is after catching Weyland huffing on a gas mask. Like Prometheus, Weyland's dying, but he wants one last ride, a chance to make history. Throughout he acts rich, entitled and selfish, but at least in the end he has an honourable death. She also name drops Ernest Shackleton, who was a legendary Arctic explorer. Eventually she's won over by the guys and made to feel guilty.
Let me ask you something. Do we stand a better chance of surviving with you, or with a number 2 choice?
She's the best of the best of the best, sir, and the only person who can keep them safe. Ooh, well, that went well. Now from here we then cut to space and get a fly through the Yautja mothership. It's very similar to how we got one with the Nostromo in the first Alien. This includes things like a computer starting up and even text reflected in the helmet, which is something they did in that film. The system loads up and we also get a hologram of the temple. It looks like a bigger version of the wrist projector one they used later on. We also saw a wrist projector in Predators when the captured Yautja showed Earth on it. This is a similar ship to the one in Predator 2, though it is a bit sleeker. Jury's still out on how the LA one got underground, but I won't dwell on that every single video that we do. Either way, they drill using the plasma cannon and the explorers head out on snowmobiles. Sebastian mentions how the Pepsi cap he found was a valuable archaeological find, with that bit being cut from the theatrical release, which is the only reason I'm mentioning it, because we're doing differences and I'm being thorough. He foreshadows the coming Predators though, as he mentions the moon's big and calls it the Hunter's Moon. Considering that the hunt happens every 100 years and the weapons are behind a time lock, ancient humans must have passed this on over time. However, that ends up not really having any real meaning. 10 is something though that constantly reappears throughout the movie. The Predators visit the planet every 10 years, which has been seen in all the films. Predator was 1987, with the second being in 1997. The Predator was then set in 2007, so blah blah blah. We also have the pyramids changing in intervals every 10 minutes. Now as they reach the camp, we have some bones, reminding me of the spines being ripped out of the humans by the Predators. We see these hanging down from a window, and these look a lot like the tail of the Xenomorph. We also have some hooks and chains dangling down. These appeared a lot during the scene where Brett died in Alien, and the Xenomorph used them to hide in plain sight. It's tense, atmospheric, and feels a lot like The Thing. However, nothing really happens, even when Miller goes off by himself. I think one of my big issues with the film is how long it takes to get to the creatures. Even in the theatrical cut, we're talking around 45 minutes. For now, we're 21 minutes in, and we see a giant whale skeleton, which clearly evokes the alien queen. Lex talks about how the entire place was mysteriously abandoned, and since then, it's basically been one of those stories on Ripley's Believe It or Not. Miller then goes in, and we get a tense scene that's just a fake out with a penguin. At least it's not a cat though, as per usual. They then discover the gigantic hole in the ice. It's said no drill team on Earth could make the hole, and it's bigger than your mum's vagina. We then go to the ship, and I love how we pan and see the image is being created to have depth. We then get the Predator suiting up, Batman and Robin style. Now it's from here we get the reveal that Wayland's he's seriously ill because he's coughing, look. Funnily enough, it actually worked out as Lance was suffering from a cold at the time. So when he's like, he's actually, it's just doing his normal voice there because he's all stuffed up like me. Lex then rattles off about her dad's death after breaking his leg up on a cliff. She and her father shared her first drink and he then ended up dying 20 minutes from the base. So he likely could have lived. However, Wayland says how it was more important to him than have that drink with his daughter 14,000 feet in the air than getting back just to potentially die anyway.
I need this.
The team then head into the tunnel, which is a pretty tense moment. Not only is it a massive drop, but there's also a storm coming in. I did wonder if this was actually caused by the mothership, as we have seen in stuff like Prey how they're thought of as being like Thunderbirds. What this does though is mask the ship sending in the hunters. Anyway, the group then make it inside, and after lighting the area up, they see a gigantic pyramid. I've seen some people mention it was inspired by the lost levels of Tomb Raider 1 and 3, but the entrance is absolutely massive, and it reminded me of the art direction for the Predator. That obviously came later down the line, mate, so I don't want to say that's for definite, and it might actually be a reference to these Batman and Predator comics. There we have things like them coming across temples with ships embedded into them. You can see that. Can you see it? And we also have giant shrines and stuff located in the lower parts of the pyramid. Now, the Predator kind of took the design motifs over from this, and like that, they built these sets to scale. They basically wanted them to be able to fit an 8-foot tall creature, which is something that they did. Amongst this, you also get lots of different etchings. Here we can see Yautja fighting a Zeno. The Predator has wrist blades and a shuriken ready, and it lets you know how this conflict's gone on for millennia. The entire part of them walking up to and in the pyramid is also heavily inspired by the Nostromo crew walking around the engineer's ship. We also get a transition where we cut to a 3D map. This helps us to get about the locations much easier, and it's similar to what Anderson used during Resident Evil. Here we cut to basically the Temple of Doom set and watch the alien queen being thawed out. As we've learned, these creatures can survive in space and are the perfect organism. It's then reanimated through using electricity, which feels a lot like Frankenstein. Her mouth extends down from her shell head, and it's a scene that's very reminiscent of the one in Aliens. There we watch the terrifying beast reveal itself to Ripley and Newt. In what may be a nod to King Kong as well, we can also see that it's kept in chains. Now if this thing looks massive, then that's because it was actually built to scale. The original designs were based off the blueprints that James Cameron drew for the character, but during Aliens, they of course had some restrictions. They didn't really have the tech at the time to build her properly, but here Anderson was able to make the legendary creature that Cameron always wanted to. And I feel it's one of the best parts of the movie. It's 15 feet tall with an 8-foot head and around 47 points of articulation, which just helps bring it to life. It cost a fortune to make though, and was more sophisticated than the T-Rex from Jurassic Park. Due to this, they needed a crane as well as 8 people controlling it with joysticks and controls. Cameron's often talked about how they had to edit around it in order to basically cover up the limitations. However, they didn't have to do that here, and it gives us a pretty badass final battle. Like I said, she really is the perfect organism, and if you'd like to celebrate your love for Alien, then why not check out our merch store right below the video. There we have a whole host of Alien-inspired clothing, including our perfect organism one as well, and stuff like the chestburster, and also our brand new Alien Earth inspired stuff. There's lots of things to choose from, and if you're more of a fan of the Predator, then we've got stuff there as well. This includes things like our Jungle Hunter design, as well as our brand new Prey to No One. Hey, the wordplay there, mate. In case you want to get more than that one as well, we have a stackable deal where if you get more of a discount. That goes up to 20% off, and it all helps videos like this get made, so thank you. Now the symbols on the wall are actually made up for the movie, and yeah, it wasn't based on anything historical, as you might have guessed, because we talked about xenomorphs and stuff. We do get some insight to the ritual though, when Sebastian translates the text and says, "Only the chosen ones may enter." Wayland in his arrogance may even think that's him, and we see on the surface that his drillers get wiped out. They draw green laser sights, and this was later adopted at the start of Alien Covenant. It also appeared in Alien Earth Episode 2, and looks so much cooler than when you use a red one. I don't think that there's any intentional Easter egg though, and it's probably just to juxtapose the red ones that the Predators have. The heat vision looks great though, but there is that dodgy CGI on the bloody wrist blade. Yeah, the effects of the time, you know, they haven't all held up, but they do make up for it when the combi sticks decloaks. Watching this, I feel like this sequence was a lot like the penthouse scene in Predator 2, except there was no bird absolutely going hell for leather bouncing on a dude's cock at the start of it. In that scene though, we watch the guys getting demolished by the city hunter, while here the mercenaries are wiped out with ease, complete with bodies hung up ready for trophy taking. Only Quinn makes it out, and Celtic appears as the bullets mess with his cloak. The snow gives him away, and this is similar to how the dust in Predator 2 was pumped out by the RWLF. Celtic is the oldest and largest of the trio, but in the end, he doesn't end up becoming blooded. The name itself is actually taken from his mask, as this was inspired by Celtic knotwork. It implies he or his lineage may have visited Scotland at some point, and thinking about that, I'd love to see like the Predator versus the Scottish warriors of old. Ye cowards, turn off your cloak! Terrible impression, but his mask's also inspired by the Guardian Predator from the end of Predator 2. This was also the first design for the Jungle Hunter. He returned for the sequel where he played the character Wolf, and later down the line he'd play the engineer in Prometheus. To prepare for the role, Ian ran on the beach with a weighted vest, and when I was hearing that story, I thought of Apollo racing Rocky in Rocky 3. Quinn then ends up falling down the tunnel, and his actor actually broke his ribs while filming this sequence. Being the badass that he was though, he didn't notice until the next day. And it looks like a great slide to be fair. We later see him almost completely frozen and the Yautja walk past him, which is an homage to Dutch, who wasn't seen when he was covered in mud. He's even seen lying against some rubble in the same way, however our expectations are subverted when he's killed by Scar. The reveal of the rest of the trio is really great here though, and we watch Scar and Chopper decloak. The latter is obviously a nod to get to the chopper, and they did a similar reveal down the line in Predators. They then bring up the temple map and we see the ritual room as the humans walk into it. Lined with bodies, it's here that the ancient humans would receive a face full of hugger. You might actually also notice the dead creatures on some of their faces. This room's also intended to be laid out like the sleeping pods on the Nostromo, and in the middle we can see a xenomorph sigil. It looks a lot like the marketing images that were used for Alien 3, which is a pretty cool detail. The design is also on the necklaces that we see the sacrifice victims wear in the flashback. On the walls we can see spines and skulls, which are clearly trophies of the Yautja. We then get a good look at the Chosen, who've been left there to die. Now this leads me to have a huge question. How did the Xenos burst out of people's chests in 1904 if there hasn't been any humans in the temple since the Aztecs? How? The crew also needed advanced equipment to make it into the tunnel, so how did the whalers get impregnated? How? It just doesn't make any sense.
It makes no damn sense. Compels me though.
I like to think that the heat bloom was intended to lure the humans there, and in the past people were either tricked to going there or captured. It's a huge reach though, and Miller later theorizes that the heat bloom was the energy source for the temple firing up. I did wonder though if that's why they cut the opening, because yeah, idiots like me might ask those questions. If they've explained it or you know the answer, then let me know below, but yeah, something seems fishy, the timelines are not matching up. Now we then see a calcified facehugger.
Looks like some kind of scorpion.
They looked at them when designing the creature, and it's why they had a scene with a scorpion and alien Earth. Now this moment was cut from the theatrical release, as Anderson said it was foreshadowing that came a bit too late. Mainly because we've already seen the alien queen. They then drop a green glow stick down through the floor. That's a deep cut, as this was put in place to give a nod to what they used to make the Predators' blood from. Rousseau and Thomas are then left behind as the rest go in and find a chest filled with weapons. Sebastian explains how the system on the chest is the long count that was used by the Aztecs. However, this was actually used by the Mayans, and I hope everyone involved in this script got fired for that. Who taught this guy about ancient calendars? Dumbass, he says as he mispronounces Yautja for the 900th time after saying it every week solidly for 4 months. Hey, at least I'm not you, mate, sat there watching this shit. Sort your life out, what's wrong with you? Now, the humans weren't intended to find these weapons, as they were supposed to be used by the Predators. This is what causes the major problems in the story, and it's because of this that the Xenos are able to group up and then release their queen. So rather than being a straightforward hunt, it basically becomes a mission about survival. We then see as the temple traps them in, and thus they can't return to the surface. Now it's in this that we learn of the 10-minute pattern shifts. Sebastian presumes this is as the Aztecs used the metric system, which no they didn't, mate, you're a terrible historian again. Now those later sequences that have the changed architecture, that really reminded me of the movie The Cube. It features deadly rooms as things chop and change. And to be honest, it's well worth a watch. I think knowing this stuff happens in 10-minute intervals though, it does cause some issues. For example, Russo gets face tug and then 2 minutes later it hatches. I've often said how it's pretty much up to the writer how long this process takes, and you have some lasting a day, others lasting hours, some lasting a couple of minutes like this, and then Alien 3 where it goes over days and days and days. But I'll give that a pass because Ripley was carrying a queen, but yeah, no consistency. I will say though that I love them getting locked in the chamber and then the eggs slowly popping up. During this, Thomas shines a light on them and you can see the facehugger scuttling inside. It's just like what happened when Kane did the same thing in the original. This was also referenced in Alien Earth during episode 3. They then hit Russo in slow motion, and we then journey back to the basement in what's a really cool shot that feels very, very fluid. Now when it came to the facehugger puppets, Cinesite were hyped for this. They done work on the spiders in Harry Potter and the Chamber of Secrets, and are some of the best practical effects in the film. Beyond this, a lot of these eggs and facehuggers were also recycled from Alien Resurrection, as ADI had also worked on that movie. Seeing this, the humans then decide to arm up, except for Lex. I love how she had a predilection against guns earlier and didn't see them as helping on expeditions. And in the end, this is why the predators don't attack her. The trio of hunters then arrive to find their gears being snagged and they decide to split up. You might also notice 2 human skulls mounted on the back of Chopper. It hints that he's hunted on Earth before, but he's not considered an adult until he takes out a xenomorph. Now they did have some sections in the movie discussing this, but this was cut as Anderson wanted to keep as much mystery as possible. The humans are then stalked by the predators and we see one hiding out amongst the statues. A guy gets grabbed by a noose and this is almost imperceptible. Now this carries the cloak of the creatures and it was also used as a weapon during the PS2 game Concrete Jungle. I did wonder why we'd not seen this used before in more of the sequels and stuff, but they are restricted on things like the plasma caster at this moment due to them being stolen by the humans. So it is nice to see different weapons because at the moment they're limited. So for all the movie's faults, we at least get a change up from the formula. Everyone's then split up due to the changing of the architecture and one poor lad's trapped underground. Miller and Verheiden then end up as the odd couple, but we don't really get to spend much time with them as they're grabbed pretty quickly. Now we are being thorough, so I just want to point out this line was cut from the theatrical version.
Well, thanks, Professor.
Actually, it's Doctor.
However, it's included in the Extreme edition because it's extreme. Starting to think, right, that extreme thing was just a marketing gimmick to sell DVDs because I don't know how extreme this is, mate. He proves though that he's tougher than the Merc as he's keeping it together and even takes out a few facehuggers later. Who's having a breakdown though is this guy on his own. Trapped in a triangle-like corridor, this creates the iconography that he's in the crosshairs of the Predator. However, something else is down there. We can hear distant hissing, and this moment's heavily inspired by the vent scene in Alien. It's cramped, dark, and we know a creature's out there, which then leads to a jump scare. He's also taken to the hive to be impregnated, which is sort of like Dallas was. If you don't recall that, then that was actually in a deleted scene that happened in the original Alien. The rest of the crew then move on as the place changes up again. We see Spencer's doubtful of his boss as all the CEO cares about his artifacts. He's not really bothered about one of his employees being killed, and yeah, this whole thing is clearly for his own vanity. Behind Miller, the place then shifts and we see a chestburster in the middle of a Predator statue. This is foreshadowing for the tease at the end, in which we'll be getting the Pred Alien. Yay, excited, make sure you subscribe for Alien vs Predator Requiem breakdown. But here then drops a plane an iconic line.
You ugly son of a bitch!
Which has been referenced throughout almost all of the movies.
One ugly motherfucker.
You are one ugly mother.
You're one beautiful motherfucker.
Except here, Verheiden saying it to a xenomorph and not to Yautja. Also important to bear in mind that the movie's PG-13, so they cut down a lot of the swearing. That's why later on, when Lex also says it, she says,
You are one ugly mother.
Both he and Miller are then grabbed. Originally though, the latter was going to escape. The character would take one of the weapons from the sarcophagus and then run out of the room. They ended up changing this though while shooting, but yeah, I think keeping him alive would have serviced the movie more. Because like, it gives this whole spiel about taking selfies for his family and stuff, and then they find his camera and it's like, oh, I wanted him to survive, like he doesn't really get to say goodbye. The rest then enter a big chamber where we see Wayland's diseases playing up. Lex tells him to drop the weapon, which yeah, if they just left it or even dropped it now, they would have been somewhat safe. But the hubris of the billionaire is too much and he offloads it to Lex. Celtic then attacks and he uses the net gun we saw in Predator 2. This closes up much like what happened there, and we also got a more extreme version during Prey. The extreme cut. Spencer's death here is also a little nod to how Colin's character died in Resident Evil. There he got cut up by the lasers, which ended up forming a net, and it was the best part of that movie. So good they even reference it in the game during Resident Evil 4. The Predator here is a complete beast though, and so far he's the biggest one we've seen. This kind of sets the groundwork for the hybrids and upgrades that we get in the later movies. To me though, what makes the franchise great is the hiding in plain sight and the mind tricks that they play, not necessarily that they're bigger. The upgrade I've always felt was the lowest point of the franchise, and it was too far removed from the original. Luckily Prey came along and took it back to basics, but yeah, this kind of started things off where it was like the Predators have to be bigger and badder every film. Chopper then attacks poor Lex before getting speared by the Xenomorph. This feels akin to the Queen stabbing Bishop at the end of Aliens. Now what's probably the most iconic moment of the movie, we get the face-off that was used in every single marketing material for the film. Like, this was everywhere. I love the extra little details here though, especially how you can see the Xenomorph's little mouth moving.
I like to eat you with my little mouth too.
Realizing it's the immediate threat, Celtic then quickly goes to assist. Guess you could say he got to the chopper. Now it's an hour into the movie and we finally have the showdown that we've been waiting for. Anderson made the choice to delay the reveals until this point, as he wanted it to seem similar to the OG Alien and Predator, where we didn't get those big action scenes until quite far into the movies. He wanted us to connect with the characters, so when they died, we actually cared. But yeah, he should have written better characters then. Celtic's mask gets scratched, and this reminds me a lot of the one we saw in the Predator. So maybe that one's a hand-me-down. Considering Lex's spears in that as well, it might actually be. As for the fight though, I really enjoy it, especially when the Predator swings a Xenomorph around. It looks like Mario 64 when you swing Bowser into a bomb. We also have the Xenomorph's severed tail, which it whips around, throwing acid at the creature. Now, there was actually a man inside that suit, and puppeteers control the arms and tails. When it came to the Predator, growing up, I always wondered why his blade would get ruined by that, as surely they'd make ones that could withstand acid. This is something one of the effects companies actually pitched, and they had a similar idea. They wanted to make an armor that wouldn't disintegrate and had been assembled purely to fight against Xenomorphs, but that didn't make it to the movie. It's here though that a Xenomorph earns its nickname Grid as it gets hit with a net that cuts into its flesh. I love this scream it has at the hour 13 mark, and it's a really cool design to differentiate it. The fight then heads to the bone pit, which is what I call my bedroom. Oh! However, unlike the real life Celtic, this one's relegated to death. His head explodes like it's right out of Scanners, and it's very over the top. Kinda reminds me of what happened to Mac in the first Predator. The humans then make a run for it, and we see Wayland a little worse for wear.
Wayland, I'm not gonna let you die down here.
You didn't.
I do like that line though, and it shows the CEO found a final thrill before heading to the next life. The Predator then arrives, and you think he's gonna die, but the creature spares him because it isn't good sport. Even though he's using a weapon, there's no honor in doing this. It's kind of like Predator 2. There, the city hunter scanned Leona and saw that she was pregnant. Here, he scans Wayland and can see the disease has riddled his body. Now, if you watched our Predators Explain video, then you'll know it's not honorable to kill a pregnant woman or someone who's sick. So, he gets dumped. However, Wayland wants to go out with honor, and thus he sacrifices himself to buy them some time. And the Predator doesn't spare him for that. The humans seem like they're screwed, but luckily the temple shifts and they're able to escape. And yeah, seeing Sebastian crawl through that closing corridor, my heart was racing a bit. He also narrowly misses the shuriken, and it's at this point we cut back to the Predator. I love how, if you're paying attention to the background, you can also spot a Xeno hiding in the top right. The facehugger then attacks, and the Predator throws another shuriken to slice it up. When that falls, we then see the Xeno make its move. It's more bothered about the Yautja being infected, but because that fails, it's time to attack. And yeah, I love how you can see it waiting there a couple moments before. However, it's a very quick round 2 and the predators come out on top. He simply slices it and goes back to his business, which seems like it's aura farming. He's not only bloody gone and done it though, mate. My mate the predator is finally blooded, and he's also done it on nightmare difficulty without any ballistic weapons. So yeah, well done mate, great job, and you definitely deserve the honor of marking your biomask. This blooding rituals are not to real life, and members of a tribe would often take youngsters out in the woods on a hunt. When they made their kill, they'd then mark their face with the blood of their prey, and this basically is what they've brought across to the lore here. Lex and Sebastian also see this marking firsthand, and it's from here they work out what the temple really is. As they leave, the facehugger comes in, makes its move, and while this is going on, Sebastian narrates the flashback sequence. And it's one of the best scenes in either franchise. Watching the ancient civilizations worshipping the Yautja like gods, we see as the pyramids were used as landing platforms. The sacrifice was played out to honor them, and in return, it led to the Great Hunt. We see a hunter holding up a xenomorph's head on a spear, and in the next moment get the wrist nuke device. The taking of the head might have actually been common, and it's why Scott does it later in the movie. Now that nuke is of course just like the end of the first Predator, where the jungle hunter would rather die than allow the humans to have their tech. Here we see it's because the temple gets swarmed by the xenomorphs, and you can see why this move was needed to take, basically, destroy everything and turn it to scorched earth. Xenomorphs of course have the power to overrun the planet and destroy the Predator's favourite vacation spot. So killing them's a necessity. It's a necessity to the tourist business. A nuke taking out a xenomorph though, you know, that's often used throughout the franchise, and it all began when the Nostromo blew up in the first film. We also had Ripley suggesting,
I say we take off and nuke the entire site from orbit. It's the only way to be sure.
Rather than a nuke though, that colony there was destroyed when the atmosphere processor blew up, which was kind of similar to an atomic explosion in the first place. Alien Resurrection also saw a nuke-like explosion when the USM Auriga blew up on Earth. So it happens throughout, and dying in this fashion does kind of remind me of the seppuku ritual that the samurai and Japanese World War II soldiers practiced. Here, it's to avoid the shame of losing a hunt, and honor is of course embedded in their culture. I read You Only Live Twice recently, which is set in Japan, and they kind of explain it like this. If you fail, you failed your peers, and the biggest, most honorable apology you can give to show that you're sorry is to sacrifice your own life, which is kind of what they're doing here. Here it's expanded upon, and the teenagers will blow up their hunting ground if they feel they're overrun, mainly due to not letting the xenomorphs escape and then breed non-stop. Knowing this is also why Sebastian begs Lex to do something similar later. Now from here we could see poor old Miller, who's about to be impregnated. He wakes up to find himself in the hive and facing down against a fate worse than death. We've seen similar things throughout the franchise, and the Marines of course came across something similar in Aliens. That was building off that deleted scene in Alien, and both Dallas and the woman there, but they both said, "Kill me." We then had a deleted scene in Aliens where Ripley found Burke in a similar position. This motif was then brought into Alien Resurrection where Brad Dourif was strung up to the hive. So it's continuing that, and back with Sebastian and Lex, we hear that they want to form an alliance with the Predator.
The enemy of my enemy is my friend.
Nah mate, they're still your enemy, but yeah, you can probably team up with them. It's a rare break from the action, which is quite a nice interval, but it's interrupted as they're chased across a cabin. Luckily, Lex is a very, very adept mountain climber. Oh, wait. Uh-oh, spaghetti-o. Seb's then grabbed by Grid, and Lex is left all alone. Just like Machiko in the comics. All that's left is a valuable Pepsi bottle cap, and the reminder that when you order a Coke in a restaurant and the waiter goes, "It's a Pepsi, is that alright?" You go, "Yeah, it's fine, no bother." So just remember that, yeah? Now, if you were watching this film and thinking like, "Ooh, I can sense a bit of chemistry between these two," then you'd be right on the money. A deleted scene had the pair almost kiss right before the xenomorph appeared and took Seb away. But they cut that because, yeah, it doesn't really go anywhere, and to be fair, it would have just been like a forced romance scene. Now, due to Lex being left on her own, she's then approached by the Predator. He's carrying his extendable spear, which is something they first showed in Predator 2. This scene's then rudely interrupted, and Lex ends up killing a xenomorph. This also finally gives us the trademark 3 dots. it usually means you're very, very screwed like Dylan, Mac and Blaine in the original. However, more xenomorphs arrive and thus Scott has to turn around and stand up against them. What we get to see that feels very reminiscent of the turret one in Aliens, and Grid manages to dodge out the way. They're then called back to the Queen, and when Scott sees that Lex has killed a xenomorph, she's now viewed as a respectable hunter. Scar takes off the creature's skin and stabs it in the nerve in order to remove its tongue. Dripping acid on it, it highlights how the aliens aren't harmed by their corrosive blood. Thus, it creates a shield and spear for Lex that will help fight against the creatures. We then see Grid meet with the Queen, and they work as a pack to free her from the chains. It's very insect-like and requires them to attack her in order to bleed her out. Just some nice horror imagery, and it lays the groundwork for what's coming in the climax. Lex and Scar then approach the hive, which feels like it's ripped right out of the ending of Aliens. The HR Giga style design here is extremely iconic, and it feels like they're entering the abyss. The walls are coated in jelly, and in the end it leads to an egg room. Unfortunately though, Miller's already dead, and yeah, we don't really get to say goodbye. What she gets though is a desert eagle on the ground, which is also what Harrigan used in Predator 2. Coming across poor Sebastian, he starts to convulse, and Lex puts him out his misery. Now, throughout all these movies, I did kind of wonder in the past whether that would kill the baby, but here we get the answer. No, it doesn't, and the chest burster still comes out its chest, but luckily the Predator catches it. With the Queen finally free and the eggs beginning to hatch, Scar decides to set the explosives. He uses hand gestures to show what's going to happen, and this is a very rare departure for the franchise. There's no vocal mimicry like what we saw with Billy's laugh or Danny Boy's voice, and it just adds a nice bit of character to the creature. She then spots the alien's saliva, which signals she's not alone. Characters often stand in something like this, and Alien Isolation players will know how harrowing this site is. Now, behind the scenes, the production team had lots of problems with the xenomorph saliva. Apparently, it just wouldn't stop producing the goo between takes.
Oh my, I can't control my goo!
Using the sled, they're then pulled at the surface, and all the xenomorphs are destroyed. Well, except one. It's a massive explosion though, and I thought it was hilarious how more and more kept detonating. But they make it out the blast site, and she ends up receiving her mock. According to the behind the scenes stuff, this is why the tribe spare her at the end. She's kind of part of them now due to having that clan mock. Because of this, I also don't feel like she'd be picked for Killer of Killers, as she's seen more of a member than a target. As with all Aliens movies though, we get a sort of fourth act. The Queen comes out, but that wasn't actually initially the plan. In the original outlines, they were going to go with Grid and have him be the final monster. Rather than the nuke going off at the eggs, Grid would chase him up the tunnel, and Skull would then throw the wrist device down, and that would lead to the creature's death, along with the rest of the hive. When building the Queen though, and seeing how much they could push the budget, I think they realised that that was the best way to take the finale. And to be honest, I feel it works a lot better, even if Grid gets an unceremonious send-off. The Queen makes it feel almost like a video game, and there's moments where Lex is running from it that, it reminds me of like a chase where you're getting chased by a monster. Also, notice that she's not wearing her coat in Antarctica at night and seems absolutely fine, but moving on. Luckily, our boy Scar returns and spears it in the head, and though we don't have an airlock, they're able to tie to the water tower and send it over the edge. It's wildly similar to Killer of Killers, where Ursa plunged the hulking predator into the water. I do wonder if Dan Trachtenberg sought out inspiration from this sequence, as he has grabbed things from the lesser known films. Scar is also speared through the chest, but yeah, this wound later disappears when we see the body on the ship. We then follow the Queen as she's pulled into the depths, which riffs off the scene in which she's blown into space during Aliens. Either way, she's dead, Scar's dead as well, and the tribe arrive and reveal themselves. This is very similar to the ending of Predator 2, and we have the Elder at the front. If you want to know how their clans operate or the hierarchy of the species, then definitely check out our Predators Explained video. Like the City Hunter, his body's taken away for burial, and Lex is then given a combi stick, which is again similar to the one that we see in the Predator. That might hint that the OWF have interviewed her at some point, but I don't know, because she's been left in the Antarctic without a jacket at night with no transport, so good luck. Either way, we end with a chest burster hatching that was planted earlier in the movie. I did wonder why they didn't scan him before taking him on board, and that always made me think the ending was a bit stupid. However, upon doing my research, I found some very interesting trivia. So, Yautja are supposed to take their own lives after being infected by a facehugger. A deleted scene showed that Scar knew he had a chestburster in him and he was planning to take his own life. However, due to the Queen getting out and the xenomorphs overrunning everything, he wanted to wait until the job was done. He was then going to end it after the death of the Queen, but he unfortunately succumbed to his wounds. The predators on the ship, they'd never really suspect this for some reason, as, you're supposed to take your own life, and thus they just didn't bother scanning him. It was a complete oversight. In the end, though, this leads to the Pred alien being born and causing the ship to crash into Colorado. Requiem picks up almost immediately after this and sees a predator named Wolf go and clean up the mess. So that's how we end the film, and according to the novelization's author, we would have actually seen the Pred alien in this movie. Either Celtic or Chopper would have died earlier, and it would have been those characters that gave birth to the chestburster. So the confusion may have arisen from those changes. There would have also been a massive fight between the humans, Xenomorph and Yautja, but this was of course cut. Interestingly, we would have also seen the alien tech handed over to the Weyland executives during a short epilogue. I'm guessing that this is where Lex was picked up from and how she survived the events of the movie. A similar thing also exists in AVP Requiem, albeit with Ms. Yutani. Now, despite the severe fan backlash that exists to this day, this movie was actually the first Predator since the original to open at number 1. Upon its release, it was the highest grossing film of both franchises, which is why that sequel immediately got greenlit. Considering that Dutch and Mike have now been added to Killer of Killers, I also wonder if they're going to tie Lex in with that as well. As mentioned earlier though, it might be because she's part of the clan, but yeah, that updated teaser at the end of Killer of Killers, anything's possible. Now, as for this film, overall though, it's not a particularly great movie. I don't think it's anywhere as near as bad as The Predator. There's moments to enjoy, and definitely some iconic parts of the film, but yeah, it just doesn't quite live up to what's expected from these franchises. I think people wanted more than a dumb B movie, and in the end, that's kind of what it is. Welcome to the Heavy Spoilers Show. I deserve an apology because I cannot believe you guys put me through this. This is one of our most requested videos, and I'm not sure what I did to demand this torture, but I have put an end to it, and we are finally breaking down Aliens vs Predator Requiem. So yes, I've watched it, well listened to it, because the movie's darker than the Night of the Long Night. It's so dark! Feeling like a big departure from the rest of the series, it's almost like a teen slasher flick mixed with Resident Evil Apocalypse. Though I don't think this is the worst Predator movie, which yeah, it's definitely The Predator, it 100% marks a low point for both franchises. Feels like that bit in The Simpsons when Marge says that Homer's ruined his jacket and he corrects her by saying, "I've actually ruined two." Yes, both franchises are destroyed. With the first film making $150 million though, it seemed like a sequel was inevitable. Though Paul W.S. Anderson didn't return, the studio still pushed ahead anyway. Now this is a series that's had directors like Ridley Scott, James Cameron, John McTiernan, people who've made some of the best films of all time. So naturally, they wanted to hand the sequel off to some very steady hands. So they went to first-time directors and special effects experts, the brothers Strauss. To be fair though, they did direct the Linkin Park crawling video, so I will let them off. Although it seems like you'd want to avoid this movie like Screen Crush, there were actually a lot of people interested in the project. Tom Woodruff and Alec Gillis had hoped to direct this installment, and they were already connected to the franchise. They worked on Alien 3 and Resurrection, along with the first Aliens vs Predator. They even previously worked for Stan Winston Studios, which helped to design the original Yautja. They were denied that, but did end up doing the VFX and suits for the movie in the end. So yeah, I'm sure they're very happy to be connected to this movie. The Now Playing podcast also brought up how the studio heard loud and clear from the fans last time that they didn't enjoy the movie, but they thought the main complaints were that it was PG-13. In their mind, people were saying the movie sucked because it's PG-13, not knowing that movies can suck in general, and it's not to do whether they're PG-13 or not. Because yeah, you can make good ones, and it's rare an age rating makes or breaks a movie. Rare, I said, before you start. As for the brothers, they initially went in pitching a Wolfenstein movie. Fox ended up turning them down, but they were like, hey, why don't you do Aliens vs Predator 2? Which yeah, I kind of wish I got that sort of deal when I got rejected from working at What Culture. But I'm not still bitter about it. Now, they of course had their own ideas, and after the over-the-top action and slow-mo of the original, fans were promised a more serious and darker horror movie. Ooh. But yeah, I didn't expect them to mean dark, literally. Yeah, because the movie's really, really fucking dark. This was so bad that it kind of sabotaged the movie's release, as it was initially planned to be released in 3D, which was the fashion at the time. However, in doing the post-conversion, they found it was far too dark and thus couldn't bring it across, which is mental. The decision to have so little light was a deliberate one though. They said that it became apparent the aliens were just dudes in suits, so tried to hide it in the darkness. This is something we talked about in our breakdown of Batman, and they'd scrapped a daylight scene because of how bad the suit looked. Showed at night though, and yeah, one of the best movie costumes ever. Even the cinematographer Daniel Pearl was sick of the directors wanting the movie to be so dark, and thus they kept him in the dark, hey.
It's not bright enough. What the
When it came to the script, the movie also went through a lot of rewrites that were a little close for comfort, let's say. Originally, this was going to focus on the ship landing in Afghanistan during the war in the Middle East, which, yeah, sounds a bit mental. Predator at this point had several spin-off stories set in major conflicts though, so I can at least get the thinking behind it. However, these were normally period pieces, and they did it excellently in Prey and also Killer of Killers. So yeah, I can see why they wanted to do that. But yeah, stupid idea. Other ideas included humans being abducted by predators and being taken off-world to be used as xeno incubators. Though this didn't make it to the final cut, it is an idea that was sort of used in Predators with the game preserved planet and the idea of abduction. But yeah, in the end, they decided to set the movie on Earth, just like the first one. This also meant they made it a direct sequel, despite the directors wanting to set it in the same time frame as Aliens. They did manage to sneak some off-world stuff in though, and this included Yautja Prime. There was also going to be a greater nod to Predator 2, as the studio wanted Adam Baldwin to return. We last saw him at the end of that film, so it would have nicely continued on from there. But 'twasn't meant to be. Instead, the movie used Colonel Stevens in a similar shady government role. However, rewatching it with this in mind, you can see that he'd have fit in very well. And it is kind of a shame, but yeah, dodged a bullet. Now, Lance Henriksen, of course, appeared in AVP 1, having been in Aliens and Alien 3. This did kind of mess with the continuity, but fans did sort of mental gymnastics, so he was the basis of Bishop, or something. I don't know, it is like a bit of a mess, because in 3 the guy's human, but then he's got look, either way, this meant that the filmmakers felt a bit more free in their casting. Thus, they asked Bill Paxton to appear, and he of course starred in Aliens and Predator 2. His role here was going to be different from both, but he asked for far too much money, and thus they took him out of the movie. The brothers also wanted Michael Biehn to play a Special Forces soldier, but ultimately the studio turned it down. Danny Glover was also considered to reprise his role as Mike Hannigan. As of this movie, the character had been retired for, let's say it with me, being too old for this shit, but he'd then be pulled back into the fray. Ultimately, it never came to be, but we do know that the character will return. He was featured at the end of Killer of Killers and will come back to the world of Predator. And let's hope he's not too old for this shit. But anyway, we've got a lot to break down, so let's get through it and point out the things I missed because I couldn't see shit. We'll also be going through the unrated cut as well, but firstly, here's a quick word from our sponsors. Okay, so I just want to quickly tell you about Whatnot, which is an absolutely amazing platform for collectors like me and you. I'm sure you've seen the Funkos, action figures, and diecast cars behind me in the past, and I was absolutely blown away when I first heard about this. In case you don't know, Whatnot's a live stream shopping app where you can buy, sell, and auction literally anything. Personally, I'm following the Funko Pops, Pokemon cards, action figures, men's clothing, diecast cars, because I've really got into them because of our Bond videos, and basically anything that pops up, like, I could do with more of those. I think over the last decade or so, you know, stuff has shifted to online marketing, and I've kind of started missing the feeling I got when I'd go into my local comic shop and got to know the people that work there. Whatnot brings that feeling back, and it's a live community-driven marketplace where people buy, sell, and discover unique products in real time. I'm a bit of an early bird, and I saw this auction of Pokemon cards going off really early, so I made sure I got involved. I picked up this Rivals booster pack, and it was super easy to bid and pay. They also have Lego, electronics, and video games, and categories for, well, everything. Because of this, you can get some really great deals and also make friends with other sellers and shoppers like you. You can also see when the auctions are scheduled to go live, so you know what time to tune in. Buying is super easy as well, and you can shop your favorite stores from the comfort of your own home. Just click my link in the description or scan my QR code and you'll get $15 free to spend if you're in the US and £10 in the UK. Absolutely free. Just use my code in the description or scan my QR code to get $15 or £10 off. Thanks. Anyway, first question, is Aliens vs Predator Requiem for a Dream or Requiem for a Nightmare? No, it was shit. It is shit, to be fair.
At least now I know who ordered the sausage lovers.
Now we open with the 20th Century Fox logo, which does the classic drone at the end of the fanfare. We then get the popping of the titles and can hear the motion tracker from Aliens. There you can also hear the vision mode sound of the Yautja. The titles also have the classic eye like the Aliens one, which is a neat touch. We then see Earth from outer space, and the first question I had is, why is it called Requiem?
Why?
No idea. Typically, the word means a musical composition as part of a mass or an act of remembrance, which doesn't fit the plot at all. I think though they just wanted a cool sounding title and an RE word which you'll often see in sequels. Batman Returns, Alien Resurrection, The Matrix Reloaded, that sort of thing. Now the opening is a recreation of the ending of AVP 1 where we saw our hero Predator get full on chest bursted. This happens as the mothership takes its dead warrior back home. Having just come pretty closely off the back of that last film though, I noticed things look very different now. And not cause it's dark. Playing these scenes side by side, you can see the designs completely changed to where we left things last time. Turn the brightness down. The bed the warrior was placed in is also completely different as well. Now if you watch the theatrical cut, we just go from the ship leaving Earth to the Pred alien and then we cut to the chest bursters being loaded on. However, when the film came out, people pointed out when the ship crashes that it was much smaller than the one we saw last time. So for the extended version, they went back and added in a VFX shot where we see the mothership and then a scout ship shoots out from it. They had to originally create all of the CGI for this bit, so it just added a lot more to the budget. Either way, this scout ship is where the Xenos are making their home. The Yautja are preparing for another hunt and they bring in facehuggers in tubes. It's very similar to how they were kept in testing for Aliens and is a nice little nod to Hadley's Hope. Beyond that, Ripley was also kept in one in Alien Resurrection and these mimic the design of the sleeping pods. Originally, we were going to see them being loaded onto the ship. Well, I say we were going to see it, but you can't see shit. This cut sequence can also be seen in the storyboards, and it was filmed with it appearing in some of the behind-the-scenes footage. But no need to include it. Panning over, we then see a trophy wall with a xenomorph skull on the bottom right, just like Predator 2. There's even an alien queen in the center, showing that one of them managed to take down the fearsome beast. This is seen as one of the most sought-after trophies, and this is why it sits above all. There's also a Triceratops skull on the right, various human skulls, a saber-toothed one, and an engineer skull on the right. Now, as of Prometheus, we know the space jockey in Alien was wearing a flight suit and that they looked humanoid. Ridley Scott obviously made the film after this, so it kind of resembles the space jockey and how it was depicted in the comics. Interestingly though, post-Prometheus, an engineer fought a Yautja in the comic Predator Fire and Stone. Now, it does look like a xenomorph skull is being prepared here. They're using a laser as opposed to the mist spray that we've seen in the other movies. Possibly because they take the less advanced tech for their hunts on the planets, which is a big plot. Keeping the shit tech on Earth is a big plot point thing. Either way, it all kicks off and we see the Pred alien arrive. Now, as much as I've been giving this movie shit, this is a great start of the film. We see the classic heat vision as well as the alien vision which debuted in the previous AVP movie. This is because the creatures have an exoskeleton that doesn't emit heat and thus they have an extra mode that allows them to see the creature. My man is an absolute idiot though as he starts firing his plasma caster on the ship. Mate, have you never seen Goldfinger? Never bloody shoot the hole, especially if you're in space. It causes a hole in the ship that sends it crashing into Earth, and in early drafts this is actually where the Predalien would have been killed. During the descent towards Earth, the Predator would fire another blast and finish it off and basically make it the shortest movie ever made. But I think this shows that they didn't really want to be too attached to the previous film, and basically, like every Resident Evil film, you know, they do the exact same thing. They normally end things on a big cliffhanger and then wrap it up in the first 2 minutes of the next one so they can tell the story they actually want to tell. But in the end, these guys decided to hold on to it and they rewrote the movie to keep the creature in for longer. We then cut to a man teaching his son how to hunt, which fits in nicely with the theme of the Predator. The hunt's then interrupted as the scout ship crashes and it comes down in Gunnison, Colorado. A similar kind of plot device was also used in the opening of The Predator when the fugitive Predator ship crash lands on Earth. Maybe this signals it's a bad movie ahead. Like absolute dumbasses though, the father and son then head to the crash site. Now I did initially think the VFX were terrible, but it has a heat wave coming off it that makes it have this kind of blurred effect. Tapping the ship, they then wake up the facehuggers as well as the Yautja. He then tries to use his self-destruct device just like the jungle hunter, but he gets his arm chopped off. Just like this absolute doofus human is about to have happened to him. Now, one of the main cardinal sins a predator can commit is to leave their tech in the hands of humans or another alien species. It's thought that if they get it, they may come looking for them and it would flip the hunter dynamic. And also mean that they couldn't come back to Earth, aka their favourite safari planet. So that's why both the predators try to destroy everything. I'll talk about Wolf more in just a bit, but yeah, the movie, it is kind of at odds with itself because you've got like Wolf coming in to tidy up, but also leaving behind skin bodies as evidence. The plasma shotgun also makes its way to Miss Utani at the end as well, so yeah, didn't really do much of a good job. We then see as the hunter's son falls over and they've now become the hunted. It's also, again, very similar to the opening of The Predator, with that movie also canonizing this AVP franchise. Two pieces of shit together, yay! Our guy then shoots a facehugger like Graham Miller in the first movie, however he gets alien blood all over his arm. This is of course acidic, it burns it off, and it sets a tone for just how gross and gory this movie's gonna be. He then gets face hugged along with his son right after this, and it lets you know the kids aren't safe this time around, mate. Which, as I've mentioned numerous times, if they kill kids, I can respect it, I respect that. However, a big issue that I have with the movie is that I think it almost goes too over the top with its body count. Now you guys know, yeah, I love a good Halloween kills, and I'm not too bothered about a murder spree. However, I think here we literally just meet characters and watch them get killed in the next scene, and this happens over and over and over and over. So because of this, you don't really get attached to the characters at all because they're normally introduced and dead before you get to know them. In the end, it just kind of desensitizes you to the violence because you're seeing gore for gore's sake. You can't really gravitate towards any of the characters because most of them are dead in the next scene. However, there were rumours that Wolf was originally put in place to be the lead, which would make this the first film where a Yautja was the main character. This later happened in Predator Badlands, but I can see a version of this film where we follow him on his mission. It's here that we then cut to the character on Yautja Prime and watch as he springs into action. The planet was first shown in the comic Predator homeworld, which may have inspired this movie. It features predators that land in Yellowstone National Park and has the same shady government figures we get here. The planet, however, wasn't officially named until Predator Eyes of the Demon. The concept art for this world looks really cool though, and I really hope Trachtenberg visits this world in depth at some point. The planet also orbits a binary star system similar to Tatooine. It features a wide range of biomes and will play a role in Predator Badlands. That movie's director and new steward of the Predator franchise, Dan Trachtenberg, said that the city, jungle and berserker predators all hail from the forest part of the planet. On the flip side of this, the feral predator from Prey comes from the desert part, so that's why they all look slightly different. Either way, it's here we meet Wolf, aura farming in his chair, and we can see that he's missing a mandible on the top left of his face, which was probably lost in combat. He's a total badass though, so it's no surprise he survived whatever broke that off. Deck also has something similar on Badlands, and this was inspired by Broken Tusk from the original AVP comic. Now the face was made with animatronics and he was named Wolf after the character from Pulp Fiction. Played there by Harvey Keitel, he basically comes in to do cleanup and mop up other people's mess. The brothers Strauss wanted him to be a more slimmed down version like the original Predator as opposed to the muscular beasts of AVP-1. Under the suit is also Ian White, who played the Yautja in AVP-1 as well as the engineer in Prometheus. The helmet was also inspired by the City Hunters one and it has Yautja writing on it. He actually has a wall of masks to use, depending on what he feels like, and I wonder if each of them is used for a specific enemy or planet. Either way, he suits up like he's Batman and hops on his ship to go and clean up after his comrades. He also grabs the plasma shotgun along with the whip, which wasn't actually in the script, but it does come in very handy later. Wolf then fires up his ship, which is a lot different to the ones that we've seen in the franchise so far. It's less sleek than the Scout and motherships, and more akin to the design of the Lost Tribe ship from Predator 2. And that's the last cool moment in the movie. End of breakdown. Now if you want something else to watch, we've got a video on... No, unfortunately, it's got nearly 2 hours left. Kill me! We then cut to the cop Morales, who's waiting for our protagonist Dallas to return home. Dallas is a convict who's clearly named after the character from the first Alien movie, and he's played by Stephen Pasquale, whom I had no idea was married to Hamilton star Philippa Sue. But a bit of trivia for you there. All about the front of the bus, the guy's also adjusting his scene kid's hair. And it looks like an emo fringe as well, which is so 2007. Now, we never find out what Dallas did to end up in jail. They never use it to be like, I'm redeeming myself. And the minor dialogue we get here, that's only in the unrated version. Dallas seems to have a strained relationship with his brother Ricky, who's unfortunately following in his brother's footsteps. The original script explained that Dallas took the blame for something Ricky did, and it also explained how their father is away on rig and sends them money every month. It's here that the movie then turns into a typical teen slasher film and starts introducing loads of teen characters. This was done because the studio realized, our target audience are people who are teenagers, so we need to sell the movie to them, so put in loads of teenagers. Ricky's trying to style his hair while working at the pizza place, and he's sick of wearing a hat when he has a sick do, bro. I'm not sure if it's intentional, but AVP kind of opened with a dude bringing pizza to his workplace, but yeah, it's making me realize that bringing pizza somewhere, pizza delivery guys, pizza popping up, it's kind of a staple in movies at this point. It's the go-to food. You may also recognize his boss as none other than David Hornsby, who plays Rickety Cricket in It's Always Sunny in Philadelphia. He makes poor old Ricky deliver pizza to his crush's house, which we see a bit later. However, the boss says he needs to go to 1427 Watercress, but as we see later, the house is 1012.
Boy, I really hope somebody got fired for that blunder.
Delving into the sewers, we see a policeman searching the area for the two hunters. Coming across a homeless guy looking for his dog, the pet arrives carrying the dad's arm from before. Now, this dog was actually supposed to be impregnated by a chestburster later on. It would have happened later when the pred alien storms the sewers, and a chestburster would have then popped out in front of the survivor group later on before then being swiftly shot. Now, I think a big missed opportunity in this movie is that we don't have any xenomorphs birthed from animals. Like, I don't know if you remember, mate, I don't know if you're as old as me, but there used to be these great alien toys in the 90s where it was like all different subspecies. It used to be like a scorpion one, a bull one, and just loads of different types. I really wish we'd got that kind of variety here, because you could have used lions, tigers, and bears. Oh my. I did wonder if this dog inspired the Predator dogs that we see in the Predator, but yeah, it's kind of a miss when the movie's set with access to things beyond humans. Because, you know, like in Aliens and Alien 3, it's always humans, or like it does infect an ox or a dog. But yeah, just having a forest full of creatures, you could have had so much variety. Ricky then arrives at the house and we get a look at his crush, Jessie. One problem though, she's got a douchebag jock boyfriend. Jessie's happy to see him though, but the moment's crushed when Ricky gets clowned on. Her boyfriend and his mates are just broing it out and making fun of him for having a job. Blondie doesn't like that they're flirting, and he looks away from the big game, planning his revenge. He also doesn't know he's about to get dumped. She says she's going to fire him, and wait, $53.50 for 4 pizzas.
We have to go back!
He then gets sucker punched by Dale outside, who then throws his keys into the drain.
We can find him in 30 minutes or less, asshole.
Sick reference though, bro.
Oh, thanks, bud.
Dude, your references are out of control. Everyone knows that.
Nah, but definitely call the police or something, because that's a bit of a dick move. Now, you may wonder why he didn't just go down and get them out. However, he didn't want to look like a chump and have the dudes basically watching and mocking him. So he decides to go somewhere else across the town and go under the town and through the sewers that way. Smart that. We then catch up with the cop as he's looking for the two hunters, and he's told that the dad usually goes out with his kid. It's really, really dark, like actually dark this time, as you know exactly what's about to happen. He has that lucidity between the face hug and burst, and I always think of this as being like that moment before someone dies where they can seem sprightly and have even made a good recovery, only to pass away in like a few hours after. It's something they did with Arthur and Alien Earth, and I did wonder if the facehugger leaves you with a state of euphoria. Not only is he about to die a horrible and painful death though, but he actually sees his dad die first. The scene is longer in the unrated edition, as we see the burster from a slightly different angle and get more of the burster. You know, in case you wanted to see more of a child dying, you piece of shit. We then cut to Kelly O'Brien, who's returned from a tour of duty. She's played by Rico Aylesworth, who you might recognise from 24. There's actually a lot wrong with her uniform though, and shoutouts to uniform history for spotting all these inaccuracies. Now, she's in the US Army, but the pattern is the Marine Corps' Desert Digital pattern. This is majorly incorrect, as the badge on her right arm says she's in the 101st Airborne. The airborne patch should be directly above the eagle, just like in this picture on screen right now. The flag on the left arm is also the wrong way around and should look like this. There's also no rank on her uniform, and
boy, I really hope somebody got fired for that blunder.
Now, if you want some clothes that it's never a mistake to wear, why not check out our merch store right below the video? There we've got all our Alien and Predator inspired stuff. Obviously, we've been going through both franchises. There's some amazing designs by Sheridan, and it all goes towards helping videos like this get made. On top of that, to make it even better, say you like 3 shirts, mate, but I don't want to spend as much. Well, guess what, mate? If you buy 3 or 2 or something else, you get more of a discount. So it pays to spend. So yeah, thank you for picking one up and you look fantastic. We then see her husband and kid greet her at the door. Her daughter looks through her bag and asks if the night vision goggles are for her. Also, I love how Kelly's managed to bring home a piece of equipment that's worth thousands purely just for a souvenir. What happened to just bringing home a thimble? At least for now though, they have an extra vision mode, and it obviously is going to come in handy when they face up against the creatures. Sort of giving her an extra vision like the Predator, I suppose. Ricky then climbs through his window because, hey, he's lost his keys. That's continuity, which I appreciate. It's also funny as later Kelly's husband will get mauled by a xenomorph through the window. There's a lovely family reunion here though, and his home's a hodgepodge of retro tech and also stuff you'd find in your nana's house. Shows how poor they are compared to Dale, and highlights the creatures are infecting all walks of life. Ricky then grabs a bat, wanting to go and get revenge, but luckily Dallas stops him and decides to help him go get the keys. It's game over now for the homeless people though, as a facehugger crawls into the sewers, which angers the dog. A lot like the pipe scene in Alien 3. The facehugger then jumps at one of them from the water, and it's much faster than the slow-mo used in the first Aliens vs Predator. And to be fair, it's a pretty strong scene. Reminds me of Alien Resurrection as well, where we saw the xenomorphs could swim. The hugger then hits the second guy, and this was also done using animatronics. We then see a xenomorph appear, which is actually Tom Woodruff Jr. in the suit. We mentioned earlier how he was one of the guys who worked on the special effects, and it's nice to see a man who can multitask. According to the book Inside the Monster Shop, filming down there was a nightmare though because the space was so small and they couldn't get much crew down. Guessing the lighting guys didn't come down by the looks of it. One of their friends then comes across them, which is when the xenomorph goes after her. We almost get that iconic shot of the Xenomorph's face right next to Ripley, which also gets referenced later on. It's also a lot like the scene where Lambert dies in the original movie. In the unrated version, this runs a little longer, but yeah, it doesn't really add much. It then gets worse as the Xenomorph's back slapped and the Pred alien arrives. I'll forgive you for not really seeing it though, and I actually had to rewind this scene because I didn't realise that the new creature had come in. It was that dark. Now, as this being was gestated in a Yautja, the team decided it would pick up traits from its host. So we can see the dreadlock-style tendrils on its head, as well as the skin colour and more muscular look of the Predator. The directors wanted to be 80% alien and 20% Yautja, and again, the xenomorph taking on different traits has some precedent in the past. To keep the fact that the Pred-Alien hybrid was going to be in the movie as well, they did a secret and nicknamed it Chet to keep things out of the newspapers. Oh yeah, if you saw the last movie, mate, you kind of had a fair idea where it was going. Either way though, they picked Chet because that's a name that's usually associated with obnoxious characters like in Weird Science. The Pred-Alien is also apparently a young queen, and early designs use molds from the one in AVP 1. The biggest difference between this one and a normal xenomorph is how the Pred-Alien reproduces. While xenomorphs use facehuggers on hosts, this hybrid impregnates women. It fits in with the forced birth metaphor that the franchise is known for, even if all the art and highbrow filmmaking is completely stripped from the movie. Worf then finally arrives on Earth as we see a drop pod separate from the main ship. It's pretty much identical to the first Predator, where we saw the Jungle Hunter ship do the same thing in the opening. The pod then lands in the water, and I do wonder if that's a deliberate choice so that Wolf can hide their tech. However, water damages their camo, and we do see it glitching out. Predator 1 saw the Jungle Hunter's camo get damaged after the waterfall scene, and Predator 2 also saw the City Hunter have this happen when he stepped through a puddle, which was a bit funny. Prey had a similar thing as well, and yeah, it's just laced throughout the franchise. It just disappears whenever it comes into contact with water. Just like us, he also can't see a damn thing as it's so dark. That is, until he locates the crash site and leaps down into the ship. He looks sad as he touches the mask of the Yautja we saw earlier, and he then takes it off. Again, this is another staple of the franchise, with it being done in every Predator since the first one.
You're one ugly motherfucker.
Putting on the slain Yautja mask, we see the scene from earlier, and Wolf analyzes the footage and sees he's dealing with a Pred-Alien. This is different to the theatrical cut, as he basically just gets some text that explains what happened. And did you really need to cut this? I mean, it lasted like 2 minutes, but yeah. Either way, he knows the Predalien's tough and is insanely strong. I'm guessing this has happened before, but for some reason he doesn't call for backup. He then pulls out a syringe that contains liquid. However, when he goes to use it on the tube, it's empty and then starts to fill up.
Boy, I really hope somebody got fired for that blunder.
This is kept in his wrist gauntlet, which then allows him to track the Predalien. Wolf then takes the shurikens we saw in the last movie, as well as a dissolving liquid that he'll use later on. He also takes another plasma caster so he can dual wield the deadly weapons. It's like the Proto-Predator killer armor or a Revenant from the Doom franchise. He then blows up the crashed ship using the same device that the Jungle Hunter had and sprints away just like Dutch did at the end of Predator. We then cut to Molly using her night vision goggles as her mother comes in. Now this might be a bit of a reach, but the mother-daughter relationship reminds me a lot of Newt and Ripley. Both Molly and Newt were residents of a place that got infected with Xenos and had a badass mother figure that helped them survive. There's notable friction between the pair though, as Kelly's been away and the dad's done most of the parenting. Much like how Quinn had bonding issues with his son in The Predator. Funnily enough, that movie's director Shane Black has a reference to his Predator 1 character in this entry later on, which you have to stick around because we're gonna point it out. You could miss that detail. Why would you want to leave this video? The dad then comes in and lays down the law, and Molly wants him to read the story, not her. It's a twist, you know, on the usual family trope where the mum is typically the comforting one for the kids. Furthering the Ripley connection, that character left her child to go off and be a space trucker, and her daughter grew old and she missed out on having those precious moments with her. Which could kind of be what they're playing on with her going off to be in the army. Or whatever it was, because they got the patch wrong. But I could be reaching as usual. We then see Kelly come downstairs wearing a white dressing gown. One that is very similar to the one that Ripley wore in Aliens. So maybe I'm not reaching. The couple then share a tender moment which was only in the unrated version. Makes sense to include this though, as it makes his death later on much more impactful, and yeah, I do think the new stuff's there, but they didn't really flesh it out, so it's not as prevalent as it could have been. The movie also reminds me of the first run of the AVP comics. There we saw a colony built on a Yautja hunting site which led to ordinary folk being killed. Either way, we then head to the sewers with the two brothers. The rats scurry past them, which is shorthand for danger is that way. Normally, you'd get the hell out of there, but the guy has a shift tomorrow, so he desperately needs his car. We then see the dead xenomorph, showing just how deadly this Predalien is. The use of hooks and chains here is also very much in line with the Alien franchise as well. On the Nostromo, they look like the xenomorph tails which we saw during Brett's death. So nicely plays off that. Riggy then sticks his hand in the shit water and his brother grills him on Jesse. They're spooked by the chestburster which looks horrible, and it's a far cry from the campy action of AVP 1. Dallas then finds a facehugger skin, and this is a callback to when Brett picks up the same thing just before his death. Now we were supposed to get a scene after this where the brothers leave, they're all panicking, whoa, 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 and then woo, a truck almost hits them. You know the one, you've seen movies before, and they always do that little jump scare to kind of ease the tension a bit by giving us a final shock and then bringing things down. They're informed that the town meeting is about to take place though, and then Morales lets everyone know that a father and son are missing. Awkwardly as well, someone suggests that Dallas could be involved. I don't know though, mate, did no one hear the massive fucking spaceship crashing into Earth? Cutting to the hunter's wife, she then comes to find out if anyone's seen her husband or son. We then see what might be Dale's dad say how they look after their own. He then defies orders and joins in with the search. It explains why Dale goes to the school later and finds his ex going for a midnight swim session with Ricky. This scene was also a new addition to the unrated edition, but yeah, it doesn't really add much. Out in the field, they then spread out and search for the pair as Wolf stalks them. He spots the trail left behind by the Predalien, and the search is called off for the night. The mother/wife then tries to guilt them into continuing, saying they wouldn't stop looking for her. The husband of the waiter stays out though, while the wolf disintegrates the body of the father and son. Now this liquid is similar to the dissolver spray that the jungle hunter used to clean his kills in Predator 1. Here though, it's used to hide any evidence of them being on Earth, which makes sense as he's supposed to be a cleaner. Poor old Ray then sees this going on, and when his radio goes off, Wolf instantly turns on the camo. The eyes then flash blue, which kind of defeats the point though. However, this is, obviously a nod to the jungle hunter's eyes flashing orange when Duke spotted him in the Predator, so yeah, whatever. That's fine, I'm sure. Yeah, I guess. Walt then kills him, and we cut to the next day where we see the hunter's wife is putting up missing person posters, which does seem redundant if the whole town's looking for them, I'm just saying. Also, that guy is 36, dear me. He is younger than me, that lad, and that makes me think the kid must have been a right little shit. But yeah, the whole town's on lookup, there's posters going up, and even the news is reporting on them not being found anywhere. Dallas then talks to Ray's wife, and we get more shots of the diner, which were all added to the unrated version, because we're going extreme. The waitress then jokingly says how the bank is hiring. This hints that he went to jail for robbing a bank, which we mentioned earlier could have actually been Ricky. We then see Officer Morales come in, and the waitress reveals that Ray never came home. Surely this officer should have checked that everyone came back in before hitting the hay, but moving on. Right after this, Morales then finds his body strung up just like Dutch's crew in Predator 1, as well as Danny in Predator 2. It's nice to know that Wolf has the time to do the important stuff. And yeah, while covering up the Predator's presence on Earth, he's also just going about leaving bodies hanging up everywhere. Now, originally, they actually wanted the Predalien to be the one that was skinning people, along with other Yautja. This would have taken place on the ship at the beginning, and basically playing to the idea of cocoon and trophies. The Morgue attendant's also shocked that anyone could do this and asks what Morales is going to do. Meanwhile, we pan over to the forest as Wolf tracks the Predalien to the sewers. Yay, another showdown in somewhere we can't see. In the night, the Predaliens made a hive, and I do like the idea of it going on beneath the town. Moving further in, he then places laser mines on the wall, and Alec Gillis explained how they're the precursor to the self-destruct device. And going beyond this, the plasma shotgun is the precursor to the plasma caster. Having it all tied to that as well just makes sense, and he activates the mines using his wrist coordinate. It's a nice development as well, and the mines were also used in Prey. He then pulls up the map, which is also similar-ish to the one the young hunters used in AVP 1. It's also very, very video gamey and reminded me of like something from Dead Space. We then see a xenomorph peel itself off the pipes, which is much like the first encounter in Aliens. Wolf is smart though, as he lures them into his trap with the laser mines and shoots them with his plasma caster. The scene is also similar to the shootout in Aliens, as they both take place in cramped tunnels. It's also almost identical to the scene where Grid and the other Xenos attack Lex and Scar. He's soon overwhelmed though, but he rises up holding two xenomorphs. They're almost blasted by his two plasma caster, but he then gets his ass beat by the Predalien, who then launches him through the concrete. This hybrid is extremely strong, as we can see, and it bursts right through the pavement above them, and gives us a lovely Papa John's product placement. Now, I don't like product placement as much as the next guy, but you'd think in a movie where they have a guy who works at a pizza place that they literally use the pizza place that's paying for their movie. Either way, Wolf isn't strong enough to burst through the concrete, and he needs to use his brass knuckles. A wrist device then turns into a power glove, and this allows him to burst through. The Predalien then gets away, but luckily he can track it. Meanwhile, Ricky meets Jessie, and she reveals that she's dumped Dale. She can tell Ricky's into her, and we get some of the cringiest dialogue I think there's ever been in this franchise.
You know, you look at me that same way in class.
Yeah, well, the clock's behind you.
What?
Tomorrow when you're in class, turn around. You'll see it.
Yeah, I know that it's there, but we both know that's not what you're looking at.
The clock line is something that she later uses at the swimming pool though, and yeah, great bit of dialogue.
Are you looking at me? Or the clock?
I'm looking at the fucking clock, love, because I'm wondering when the fuck this is gonna end. Yep, we went from Aliens films at points which were considered art to this shit. Yay! Either way, as we've said, she's dumped Dale and has moved on. We then catch up with the waitress though, who gets stripped on. Again, this is similar to before Brett was killed, and it was later used in Alien Earth on the Maginot. The poor old waitress then says she'll be staying at one of her friends, and we see her rubbing her stomach. Later, the Predalien looks at her belly and is clearly using her to gestate because she's pregnant. It then seems like the chef's spine's ripped out, which is a trademark of the Yautja. So, while the Predalien doesn't skin people, it does appear to be taking trophies. It's a very brutal scene, and did remind me a lot of the kitchen scene in Jurassic Park. A pure xenomorph then smells her, which again is much like the trademark scene from Alien 3. The scene was originally supposed to be much longer though, and we'd get some point of view Predalien shots where it tracked and stalked the waitress. This would have confirmed as well why she was one of its victims. It could see her fetus, and as mentioned, this Predalien's part queen. We saw the alien queen laying eggs in AVP 1, but here it deposits them straight into a host's throat. So the egg sac is part of the Predalien's mouth, and yeah, it's pretty weird to be honest. We then cut to Molly, and I like how we think there's a facehugger, but she's just reaching for the night vision goggles. Later on, she looks out the window and sees a xenomorph in her backyard. Once again, reminding me of Jurassic Park, but this time it's the Lost World. Molly's parents think she was just having a nightmare, but we get a very cool jump scare. But yeah, it's literally just the scene from the Lost World, and I did wonder how they thought they could just shamelessly nick it. Her dad's then massacred, and the pair run as fast as they can. Now, the father was originally going to survive, which happened in a deleted scene where they then run to a bus depot and meet with other survivors. Molly would have also had a different introduction. Dale and his mates would have been playing stickball, and they would have asked Molly to retrieve the ball. We then see a xenomorph about to grab her before she pulled the ball out the drain. So sort of playing off it a bit. Meanwhile, we see Morales and Dallas chilling at the bar. Don't really think this is time for a drink though, mate. He tells him about Ray, and Dallas asks if he's informed his wife. This line is also for the unrated version. Look, we're being thorough. The pair are then alerted to a gas explosion in the sewer, and for some reason, Dallas goes with the cop, which doesn't make much sense, but he's like, I'm gonna come along for the ride. We then catch up with Wolf as he's chased by the Predalien to the power plant. Now this could be a reach, but it might be a homage to the atmospheric processing plant from Aliens. I love as well how he gets him in the vision and he's already fired off his shot because yeah, it's on site, mate. A poor power plant worker then gets his head tongued, and this was actually a model made for the movie that I think translates really well to screen. So I've been dogging you for a bit, but well done. Wolf then finds the helmet and tracks the Predalien with all hell breaking loose. Rather jarringly, this scene is also interspersed with a scene at the swimming pool, which editing wise is such a weird choice. You've got the pair getting close, but cut through this is Wolf and the Predalien fighting. I don't know if they're trying to tie the themes of hunting together, because Dale shows up to beat him up, but you've got two of the universe's greatest hunters, and then two high schoolers having a fight. So I don't know if it works, mate. The pair duke it out though, with the Predator getting some serious damage that causes him to fire blindly at the power plant. This then causes a power cut, which, Predators are fucking idiots, and thus the lights go out across the town. Things then go from bad to worse as a Xenomorph jumps into the pool. It reminds me a lot of when Newt was snatched during Aliens, and builds off the creatures swimming in Alien Resurrection. One of the bullies is grabbed as they try to escape, and it then leads into a bloodbath. I said bloodbath! The Xenomorph from the pool then drags its kill and starts to feed on it. Now, I believe this is the first time we've actually seen a Xenomorph on screen. Normally, they take their prey away and cocoon them and just leave them for a facehugger. So I don't know if they didn't get the memo or wanted to add this, but it shows that the creatures actually eat humans. The feast doesn't last long though, as it's killed by Wolf using his combi stick. The stick is probably my favourite weapon out your arsenal, but it sadly doesn't get much use here. The Xenos then dissolved, and we later see when Morales and de facto Deputy Dallas arrive, it's even dissolved away the water. Hearing from Ricky that there's something at the school, this then feels very much like a teen horror movie. I did also feel like it was sort of playing off the scene in Predator 2 where the cops discover the massacre. It's just a lot darker and grittier, and a lot darker because you can't see shit. But yeah, I love these scenes in movies where people show up in the aftermath. Overall, it's actually a good part of the movie, and the lockers lined with blood add so much atmosphere. This short scene was actually not in the theatrical cut, but only in the unrated version, and I have no idea why they cut it. Dallas then thinks that they should be calling for help, but surely, like an explosion at a nuclear power plant, that would be like national news.
Why?
Where's the governor?
Why?
Where's the senators?
Why?
Why am I doing this movie? Because I'm nice to you guys. At the diner, we then see the hunter's wife witness the waitress with a baby belly burster, which is what I'm calling it. In the theatrical cut, she actually found the waitress after the chest burster had disappeared and simply walked in on the aftermath. Now, because of this is actually the first Alien movie where we don't actually see a facehugger come from an egg due to this new gestation method. We then see multiple bursters come out of the woman's stomach, and this allows the Predalien to saturate Guinnison without eggs. The huggers need to be near a human and only produce one xenomorph, whereas here they can reproduce at a rapid rate. I did even wonder if they deposited extra embryos due to there being a baby inside the woman's body, which then meant there were more hosts. The town also sounds like it's an absolute chaos, and we pan up a tree and see Wolf at the top. The blood is going up the tree, and it did make me wonder if we were going to pan up and see Wolf had been hanged and skinned. This is because the music's the same as in Predator when Billy sees the Green Berets. Now this scene also kind of mirrors the medkit scene from that first movie. There the jungle hunter's blood was noticed and it then tried to heal itself. Wolf then howls in pain at the medical device healing its wounds, and the jungle hunter did the exact same thing. Jungle's howls alerted Dutch's crew, while here Wolf's howls alerts Molly, Kelly and an old guy. Those three are hiding out in a graveyard, and it might be a callback to Predator 2 as the city hunter stalked Mike at Danny's grave. At the start of the scene, the older guy is also leaning on a grave which has the name Hawkins on it, which is the name of Shane Black's character in Predator 1. Was it worth sticking around for that Easter egg? Let me know in the comments below, and don't dislike the video, and make sure you subscribe, and make sure you buy our merch, and make sure you become a member for 99 cents a month. The guy then gets a mother and daughter to hide behind the grave as the town sounds like all hell's breaking loose. Wolf hears them and sees the guy stand up, and we hear his dialogue repeating like in Predator 1 and Predator 2. He then gets plasma casted in one hell of a shot. Can't show it here, because of bloody YouTube, but it's moments like this that really stepped up the rating and took things from the PG-13 last time. Luckily for the girls, Wolf's laser sight hits the gun, which convinces Kelly to run away without it. Had she picked it up, she would have been fair game for the creature, but as she's unarmed, the code of honor prevents Wolf from killing her. Similar to how the city hunter let the kid go out the cemetery in Predator 2. We then see the whole town's trying to evacuate. One thing I liked about this movie was how it seemed like a perfect sequel to Paul W.S. Anderson's first one in more than just a story continuation. Anderson, of course, helmed the Resident Evil movie series, and the first AVP was kind of similar to that film as it takes place in a secret underground facility. That was of course based on Resident Evil 1, and its sequel was about an overrun Raccoon City. Though primarily based around Resident Evil 2, it also took the city being nuked from Part 3. They end this film that same way, with a city being destroyed by an atomic bomb that just wipes everything out. It also builds off the Predator history scene from last time where we saw them nuking the Aztecs. Or Mayans, I can't remember. Basically though, resorting to the strategy of just blowing everything up when a place gets overrun. Morales then almost runs over the hunter's wife, who tells them what happened to the waitress. We then learn that the National Guard are on their way, however these survivors need weapons to last as long as possible. In addition to this, Dale gets put in his place, which was really satisfying to see. There's also no signal on the Nokia phone. You see kids, before your fancy Androids and iPhones, we had brick phones and none of your Snapchats and iMessages.
Hey everybody, an old man's talking.
And it was better back then. There's no signal could also be a reference to the first Predator, as deep in the jungle their radios wouldn't work. And it's kind of a modern day equivalent to that. And I say modern day, it's like 20 years old at this point. In another connection to Resident Evil, the gun shop was also a key location in Resident Evil 2. And I've just realised the new Resident Evil is called Resident Evil Requiem. Fucking hell! Which is definitely not a good sign. The National Guard then finally arrives, but ends up suffering the same fate as the Colonial Marines in Aliens. We see the soldiers being slowly picked off by the Xenomorphs as they patrol with night vision, similar to the Yautja. One of the workers in the shop then thinks terrorists are the ones behind the attack. Something that was a fear at the time due to the Afghan and Iraq wars raging on. The two guys are then recruited into this new posse as Molly and Kelly run into the same building. It's one problem though, the roof is swarming with Xenomorphs. The Ripley new connection then goes further as they try and join a crew of people with guns, who were also supposed to see Morales die here as he was gonna get ripped to shreds. But he survived, yay, amazing, he's my favourite character in my favourite movie. Cutting to the hospital, we then see how the town's in disarray and a pregnant woman's being taken in. The Now Playing podcast brought up how stupid it was that all the survivors went to the hospital looking for a helicopter when they could have probably just driven out of town. I mean, the National Guard have just drove in, so the roads are clear. But no, instead, they need to head to the hospital because it has a helicopter on the roof. And yeah, that's how they're going to escape. But part of me, the cynic in me, literally thinks they engineer this entire thing just to say this one line. Get to the chopper! At said hospital, we see people being wheeled in, but these aren't any of our main leads. Now, being not a screenwriter myself, but watching a lot of movies, I would have thought you could have had like the characters getting injured at some point in the movie and then taken here, and this is where the group all forms. Like screenwriting 101, mate. The Pred alien then goes to the newborns, and we see it visiting the pregnant woman's ward. Killing the nurse, it then goes to impregnate the pregnant woman, which it's kind of like, I don't know, mate. I don't get offended by stuff, but it kind of just feels like it's been done for shock value rather than having like anything to say. Like I said, mate, that first Alien movie was art, and what the fuck is this? Back at the hunting store, Wolf then attacks our boy Dallas as he's holding a gun. He's strung up and used for bait so Wolf can kill the xenomorphs. I did laugh at how quickly he got out of the trap though, and Wolf made no effort to move him away from the other survivors. The poor stoners then get their heads blown off, and Dale decides to ditch and become xenomorph food. His face then gets Freddy Kruegered, and as he's not holding a weapon, Wolf doesn't put him out of his misery. Harsh that, mate, very harsh, but dems the rules. The throwdown between the xenomorph and Wolf then happens off screen for some reason, and this is another issue that I have with this movie. In a versus film, you want to see some fights between the Predator and Alien, and you also want to see a winner come out on top. Instead though, they nuke the place as the battle's at a stalemate and kill most of the characters, so you don't really get the satisfaction of there being a decided winner. You know what I mean? Like Godzilla vs. Kong, like, yeah, you have a winner that comes out of that. And you think in a versus movie, you want to have a fucking winner. That's the whole point. That's why we want to see them fight. Now, there are actually two characters, Kendra and Curtis, who were cut from the movie. They were originally going to see the nurse getting killed and then try and escape the hospital in a car. A xenomorph would then jump, but Kendra would throw it off by braking. They cut that out though, so they don't really do shit. Either way, at the hospital, the doctor's killed and the pregnant woman's turned into a sort of hive. She's turned into a cocoon, much like we saw in a deleted scene on the Nostromo, Alien Resurrection, and Alien vs Predator 1. Also, it makes sense why it kills the male doctor, as it can seemingly only impregnate women. Unlike the facehuggers, it bites off his nose, which kills him, and though it's a bit of a shock to see it pull back, it doesn't really make any sense why he dies from getting his nose bitten off. But never mind. The survivors then see the site of the massacre and call for help. Colonel Stevens answers, and as mentioned, he was originally going to be Adam Baldwin's character from Predator 2. Some of that plot still lives on here though. We can see OWF on his monitor, and in case you didn't know, that stands for Otherworldly Life Forms. They've investigated every sighting of the Oucher, such as the incident in 1987. They then got turned into Project Stargazer in the Predator. So it's pretty cool that the group gets a nod here. It's projecting a containment level, but as we know, the Pred-Alien's breeding much faster than a normal xenomorph outbreak, which is probably why the nuke was authorized in the first place. He looks like he's in a trailer, much like Keyes had in Predator, but we later see he's actually in a plane. Steven then says, "What the fuck are you?" as he sees the footage of the Pred-Alien. It's exactly what Dutch said to the Jungle Hunter. The noise we hear when Stevens uses the console also sounds like Mother from Alien. He has far more information than someone who's there on a rescue mission, as we can see a hive on camera from the hospital. They're then told that the airlift will be in 30 minutes, but actually, it's a trap! He can't let anyone who's seen what happened get out, and containment comes first. They then head off in the striker tanks, which calls back to Aliens, as we had everyone driving in an APC. Back at the hospital, we can then see, wait, no, I can't see shit, and this movie is far too dark. I'm trying to find Easter eggs in this shit, and I can't fucking see it. I actually boosted the brightness for this bit as Wolf's standing on a roof charging his handheld plasma caster up, which is a great detail I'm sure you're glad I spent time on. We then see the xenomorph swarming in, and Kelly explains to everyone how the airlift's a trap. She knows firsthand from working in the army that they just think of containment first. The hunter's wife then says it's crazy as the government doesn't lie. Okay. They then plan to nab the hospital chopper, which is a big risk as the survivors there could have already taken it. Rickety Cricket joins them though as Morales departs for the airlift, which is clearly never coming. I mean, but to be fair though, I would have joined them. Arriving at the hospital, we then see it's a ghost town and Kelly's to be protected at all costs due to her being the pilot. Luckily though, the chopper is still on the roof as we see Wolf scout the area. The hospital itself has been turned into a hive though, and the Oucher sees skeletons in the wall. Poor old Rickety Cricket is then the first victim as the survivors light up the xenomorph and Jesse runs away. Wolf then throws down with the Pred-Alien, but it lets one of its offspring fight the Oucher. Poor old Jesse then gets skewered by one of the shurikens, which is quite brutal. The unrated cut even included extra footage that showed her just hanging there ripped in half. The Predator would also bring back these shurikens as well as the Project Stargazer soldier cut off his arm when trying to use one. Ricky then stupidly fires at Wolf, which leads the Oucher to get speared down the lift shaft. The brother then gets stabbed with the Pred-Alien's tail, and this is a classic move that took out Bishop in Aliens. However, the character does survive the encounter. Initially though, in the original version, Ricky was actually supposed to die here. The Pred-Alien would have ripped him in two, just like what the Queen did to the android. However, Fox hated it, and as such, he was just impaled instead. The armor does nothing. We then cut to the airlift survivors who are all under siege from all angles. You can also hear the motion tracker sound effect.
God help us all.
Meanwhile, our hospital crew attempt to get to the chopper. But yeah, I'm telling you, mate, this movie was all written so they could just say this line. Dallas then acts as a distraction as Kelly, Molly, and Ricky make their way to the chopper. It's similar to Billy, who held off the jungle hunter so the others could get away. He also says, "Hey, come on over here!" Just like Dutch when he tried to lure the predator into his trap.
Come on, come on. Kill me, I'm here, kill me!
He blasts his xenomorph, then another runs right past him, hands out, just like when the creature took Dallas in the first film. Wolf then arrives at this point though and unveils one of the most unique weapons in his arsenal. It's the whip!
Correct that whip.
And finally, the Pred Alien and Wolf face off 1v1. All the while, Stevens is looking at a nuclear strike about to go down. Morales wants to know how long until they're going to be evacuated, and he just keeps saying, yeah, nah, aircraft's on the way, mate. I'm round the corner. There will be no airlift, you stupid slut. Wolf then strips off his masks and weapons to fight on an equal footing with the Pred Alien, just like the jungle hunter did before fighting Dutch. I don't know why the Pred Alien just stands there and lets him do the whole, oh look how cool I am, look how mysterious I am. But it is a movie, I suppose. Admittedly, it is a pretty cool fight here as Wolf uses his wrist blades to go right through the Pred Alien's skull. The Pred Alien then gets him as well, and it kind of leads to a stalemate. As the chopper goes out, a jet flies back and the nuke's then dropped, which is exactly the same as a lot of those early Resident Evil games. The fight was going to last much longer though, and Wolf would have impaled the Pred Alien with its own inner jaw. They of course both die in the nuke, which was originally going to be different. The acid from the Pred Alien would have heavily wounded him, and his arm would have then been sliced off before he could complete the self-detonation device. I think this death here is a little bit better, but yeah, sadly, it kind of just takes most of the main characters out, including Morales, who's just blasted away. Originally, he was going to die for the gunshot, but yeah, they kept him alive in order to show this. And congratulations, you're still dead. Again, all the shots here look really, really like Resident Evil, and I can't help but think that it was on the creatives' minds. Predator, of course, also ended with them flying away in a helicopter looking at the blast, so maybe they were leaning more towards that, and I forgive them. We then see the aftermath of the helicopter crash, and the site looks as destroyed as the jungle at the end of Predator 1. Sort of like the opposite of that movie though, where they escaped in a chopper, but in this one they're crashing. Kelly then looks out, just like Dutch at the end of the first movie. Predator 2 also saw Mike looking disheveled as he met the OWF before they left in a chopper. Her daughter also asks if the monsters are gone, with his 2 being what Newt called them in Aliens. Now, there was an alternate scene shot which showed the Special Forces team gunning down the survivors. Considering Stevens lied about the airlift, it does make sense. However, I think you kind of want at least something in the movie that's a bit more hopeful and doesn't make you think it was all for nothing. Because yeah, what a brutal ending that would have been. At least the dad, like in the mist, still lives. Lives with the knowledge that he killed everyone. We then see Stevens deliver the plasma shotgun to Ms. Yutani. She is of course one half of Whale and Yutani, and they tease that the tech will be used for things off-world. They've of course started bringing Yutani into the franchise more and more, with her descendant appearing in Alien Earth. Cut from the movie was also a sequence with the facility where xenomorphs and Yautja were being kept for study. It would have been shown after this final scene and possibly have set up a sequel. This scene, though in itself, made a lot of sense at the time, as the previous movie had Charles Bishop Wayland. So here we're getting the other person who'd eventually seize the corporation. Their rivalry was actually being built up to be something that was crucial to the original film's plot, but in the end it didn't get off the ground. In that movie they actually wanted Peter Weller to play Yutani, and we'd have seen 2 80s robot actors butting heads together, even though I'm sure Yutani sounds Japanese to me. Here though, Ms. Yutani is played by Francoise Yip, who actually reprised her role in 2018's The Predator. Sadly though, these scenes were cut from the movie, but there was going to be a post-credit scene that would set up the original Alien. It would have featured Ms. Yutani holding the pistol and then cutting to a spaceship with the Whale Yutani logo. It would then be implied that the plasma shotgun would kickstart a tech revolution and lead humanity to the stars. This jump cut was supposed to mimic the opening of 2001, where the bone transforms into the spaceship. This would have meant that AVP 3 would take place 100 years into the future and feature a crew heading toward the Xenomorph's homeworld. We then see a crew of Yautja trying to retrieve a king alien. This scene definitely made me sit up though at the time, mainly because it was the only well-lit one in the whole movie. Hey, In the end though, this teaser never really materialised, and this film was pretty much a requiem for the franchise, eh? AVP Requiem was widely panned by critics and fans, and the teamup franchise was pushed to the wayside. The studio then decided to do a sort of reboot, and thus they went back to Ridley Scott. We of course all know how Prometheus turned out, and there is a breakdown of that movie on the channel now. Since then, Romulus director Fede Alvarez has expressed an interest in directing a movie with Dan Trachtenberg. Makes sense as well, as they're clearly bringing the franchise together, and we may even get Aliens vs Predator soon. But I doubt it, mate, just call it Aliens vs Predator Reboot. Hey? Overall though, it's a pretty bad movie, and I walked out of it wishing I didn't see it. Only joking. Yeah, I couldn't see shit. And that wraps up the breakdown. Please drop a like on the video and drop a comment with all your thoughts below. If you want to follow us on Instagram as well and keep up to date with what we're doing, then make sure you check us out at Heavy Spoilers. Did you know as well that members of the channel also get early access to videos, and if you click the join button you get at least one breakdown a week before anyone else. Costs just 99 cents a month, you get at least one breakdown a week, mate. Is that worth it to you? Is it enough to help fill the void before everyone dies? I don't know, mate, but that's the price it's at. And we appreciate it. But yeah, I'm already moving on to the next breakdown. You might have seen me scrolling away. I'm moving on to the next thing, mate. I'm glad this is behind me now. I'm going to go review a good movie, and I'll hopefully see you over there. If you want something else to watch, we've also got a breakdown on screen right now. So hopefully it's a better one that you really want to see, because I don't know how many people of you made it to this point in the video, but if you did, drop an F in the chat. With that out of the way, I've been your host Paul, you've been the best, and I'll see you next time. Take care, peace.